and I've been told my volume is a little bit low. Is anybody having trouble hearing me?
Is there a captioner, or can you please turn on captions?
Okay, I think yeah, it looks like captions are on. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order at 6:03. I don't believe we need to vote on that. So we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Oh, great, I cannot minimize while I'm recording a meeting. That's perfect. All right. Okay, first off, roll call. I believe this is technically the clerk of the court's responsibility, but we have new roles for just about everybody. I'm also admitting some people. Oh, geez. Okay, do we have Brandon?
He's here. He just raised his hand.
Here. Sorry.
You're good. I'm here. Do we have Mason? I can't see the camera if you guys are like raising your hand.
He said here in the chat.
Said here in the chat.
Okay. Do we have Juliana?
Here.
Okay. Do we have Robbie?
Here.
Erica?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay. Do we have Kami?
Hi, Marcus. I'm here.
And Misa?
Here.
Okay. And then our complainants and defendants, David. I see you, David. I see Adora, and I see Watfa. I believe that covers everybody.
Hey, Marcus, I'm here. It's Jane.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
We've got a lot of cases. Yeah, Jane is going to be the spokesperson for EOB for the purposes of their portion. Okay. All right. Moving on to procedural announcements. Does anybody have specific questions about procedure? Bear in mind, this is a new role for me, so I'll answer it to the best of my ability. But no promises. I see Cindy's hand.
I raised my hand on the video thing first. I didn't raise it on the actual raise hand feature. I wanted to repeat for the benefit of those watching for the recording that I am formally protesting that the meeting is being held without meaningful public notice to the student body as a whole, and that the student body has not been given a meaningful opportunity to file amicus briefs because the student body has not been notified of any details of the case, or even that the case exists at all beyond about 3 hours ago. Also, some of the key evidence has not arrived yet. And even if it magically arrives during the hearing, the student body nor the plaintiffs will have the opportunity, nor the defendants for that matter, will have the opportunity to assess the evidence meaningfully on their own. And you said before the recording that you think we'll be fine, and I just wanted to repeat that on the recording that I am formally protesting that in case it is necessary on appeal.
Okay, noted. Cindy.
Thank you, Marcus. I just wanted to ask, as a witness, can I ask questions of like J-Board or like how evidence was acquired? Can I ask questions about that?
I don't see why not.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure so I didn't like break protocol or anything like that.
Yeah. I would just ask that you try to make it concise. You know, don't feel like you need to leave things out that you wanted to know.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Johnny.
Yeah, I've never been through a J-Board trial. I'm here as a witness. I don't know if I have to state my role here, but does this function very similarly to how courtroom and court proceedings function?
Well, it might, but I've never ran a courtroom proceeding, so you know it'll run as similar to a court proceeding as I know how to make it. So
Perfect. Just looking for a frame of reference. Thank you. And you're doing great, Marcus.
Well, it just started. Okay, David, I see your hand. That's not from before?
I would like to say if no one really knows how this, no one has done this before, and we don't really have an extremely clear picture of exactly how the meeting is going to go down. In the past, the appeals to the rules around procedure have been used as a bludgeon against participation, and so I would like to ask that although we will do our very best to keep this civil, that if we don't know the rules, let's not appeal to the rules to prevent participation. You have not done this, but it has happened in SGA before, so I just wanted to bring it up.
Okay, noted. All right, anybody else? I don't see any hands right now. Okay. All right. With that, we will move on to reading of the complaints. We have 4 complaints, and the way I was seeing it was that we would hear each individually back to back, and then the J-Board will deliberate on all of them together and issue the ruling for all of them, assuming we reach a conclusion on all of them, issue a ruling on all of them at the same time. Let me pull up the complaints. Sorry. Okay. All right. The first allegation was failure by the Vice President of SGA to uphold their constitutional duty and not holding constitutional revisions in the spring quarter of 2021. The second complaint, 2 SGA spring candidates allegedly broke EOB bylaws by accessing their candidate information form before the time allowed, and an allegation with that of negligence on behalf of the EOB to notice that. Third complaint is of conspiracy between SGA candidates, or just one candidate, and the Election Operations Board to provide better text formatting of their candidacy over other candidates in spring quarter of 2021. And the fourth allegation, failure by the Election Operations Board to notify candidates of election results 3 hours before making that information public in the spring quarter of 2021. Oh, got some people in the waiting room. I see Watfa's comment in the chat. Yes, I would be totally okay with someone becoming co-host. How do I do that? Oh, I see. Okay, Brandon, surprise, your co-host.
Sounds good.
All right. So yeah, if you could just help me keep an eye on like the waiting room and fix up any problems I make.
I'll try my best with this.
Thank you. Okay. So these are the complaints. Now we're moving on to open forum. Do any members of the audience have issues that they want to mention? I see David's hand and I see Brandon's hand as well. David, go first.
I wasn't, the exact structure of the meeting was not shared with me. So I wanted to know, is there going to be like an opportunity, like the complainant presents their complaint, that the defendant defends themselves to the bed, and then people ask questions or something. I mean, I can present why I made the complaint, which is why I raised my hand, but I also wanted to check if there was a formal structure or if this was the time to do that. Because again, the structure of the meeting wasn't published.
Sure. The structure of the meeting was sent out to at least some of the people involved. I assumed everybody got that email.
The formal
My
procedure
apologies.
published or was not sent to me, so I don't actually know how this is going down.
Okay. I'm just.
Would you like me to send out the schedule in the chat?
That would be great. Yeah.
I
If you've got a version that everybody.
Of like the complaints, but I didn't get like, how the procedure would go. That was what my question was about.
Yes.
And I mean, you could forward it to me, but I'm not going to be able to like duck over and read it and understand it. So if you could also just go through the procedure for the benefit of everyone
Sure.
present, just high level overview of the procedure.
Yeah. Okay. So we're in open forum, and after this, we're going to do opening statements. The complainant and the defendant make an opening statement in that order. So we can just do that for each claim. After that, questions from the court, and then the complainant presents witnesses, evidence, and testimony. And then the defense will be allowed the opportunity to cross-examine witnesses. And then the defendants present their witnesses, evidence, and testimony, and the complainant is then allowed to cross-examine their witnesses. After that, we have closing statements, complainant and then defendant. And we'll repeat this process for each of the allegations. And then after we've finished with each allegation, we'll go into executive session deliberations, and then adjourn, and decisions will be made after we adjourn, and we'll notify the people involved and make that notification public. Does that kind of, okay.
And it's in the chat, so yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Okay. I didn't see who was next. Was that Brandon? Were you next?
Oh, did you still need me to put the schedule in the chat, or are we good since we reviewed it?
Yeah, go ahead, just to be safe. All right, Jane?
Yeah, are we going to be beginning with allegation 4 or 1?
Oh, thank you for reminding me. Yes, we are going to begin with allegation 4, so that members of our community can observe their religious practices. And then after allegation 4, we'll do 1, 2, 3 in that order.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. Cindy.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to ask if I have a question about something in a specific allegation, should I wait till the allegation is like in motion?
Yes. But
Okay.
if you've got pretty meaningful question, and it doesn't seem like there's being given time for it, feel free to raise your hand, post it in the chat, DM me or Brandon. We'll try to make sure everything gets addressed.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
You are welcome. David, hand still up, or is that from before?
Oh, I just chronically forget to put my hand down.
No worries. We all do it. Okay.
Also, your audio is still really low. I think if you go under Zoom preferences, you can adjust your microphone level under Zoom preferences. Under the audio tab, would you be able to do that? Because if I turn it up so that I can hear you, then everyone's really loud other than you.
I will try. I think I need to pause the recording so I can minimize. So I'm just going to do that real quick. Okay. And as I said before, we are beginning with allegation number 4, which, as a reminder, is failure by the Election Operations Board to notify candidates of election results 3 hours before making the information public in this spring quarter 2021. So first, David, as the complainant, you're allowed to make an opening statement. So I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to give some additional context for this complaint because it seems kind of random and inconsequential. The reason for this complaint was that after I filed the protests because of the other complaints, I asked that EOB delay certification of the results. And I was told that that could not be done because the rules. And I looked up in the rules and that was not in fact the rules. And it seemed like the situation was being handled rather chaotically and it seemed like I was getting dismissed. And so it's kind of like, I have mentioned before in GB that the rule, and I mentioned earlier in the meeting that the rules sometimes gets weaponized as a bludgeon to basically make people shut up. And sometimes the appeals to the rules, culturally speaking, in SGA, sometimes people will say, well, we have to do X because the rules, or we can't do Y because the rules. And it took me a few months of being at SGA to realize that sometimes that's just complete bullshit. And the people in question don't actually know the rules and are not appealing to the rules. They're just appealing to an abstract sense of authority. And so when Kelsey told me that they couldn't delay certification of the results because of the rules, when that's literally not in the rules, I looked, and I sent an email about it. I responded, I'm like, this is, it's not in the rules. I felt like I was getting institutionally gaslit, which is a thing that has just repeatedly happened in SGA to me. And I think that it's kind of a toxic function of the way that SGA engages with the general student body. And all of this was happening right leading up to the announcement. And honestly, I was really pissed off that I was getting gaslit about the rules when they weren't even following the rules themselves. So this was ultimately like, oh, you want to talk about the rules? We can talk about the rules because I don't like getting bullshitted and gaslit. And you want to talk about the rules? We can talk about the rules. And if there had been no issue with anything else with the election, honestly, the fact that they didn't notify candidates 3 hours beforehand would be completely inconsequential. But in context, it really pissed me off. So that's why I made the complaint. And materially, they did not do so. They can't prove otherwise. So, I mean, do you want me to show like the time-stamped email of when I got notified and a time-stamped email of when they sent out the public announcement? I can do that.
If you're asking me, that would be for the next section. This is just kind of your opening remarks.
Okay. So that's my opening statement.
Okay, thank you,
And
David.
it's this was after my interaction with Kelsey, although the complaint is about EOB in general, because technically it's an EOB thing, not a Kelsey, even though my interaction was with Kelsey at the time.
Okay, noted. Cindy, I see your hand. What do you got?
I just want to repeat to everyone that many times in SGA now, I have asked for the request of not saying one word. Because I have trauma associated, because it is a mental health thing for me. Those of you in SGA know exactly what that word is, and it has been repeated multiple times already. So if we could just stay away from that one word that has been my request all year, and it is still being disrespected. So could we please stay away from that word? The word that was just said that begins with a G and refers to emotional manipulation. So please, that is just my 2 cents, as I am here as a witness and I can't really get out of this meeting. So
Okay.
thank you. Just wanted to make that known.
All right, your concern is on the record, Cindy. David, I do see your hand. I just want to make sure we get to the defense's opening remarks.
This was just specifically about that. I appreciate that the word is a word that is should be avoided to be used. And I have since earlier this year, I have been very careful not to use the word in GB. Unfortunately, it is the only way to accurately describe the phenomenon that has some of the phenomena that have been happening that led to these complaints, and there isn't really a good way to express what happened other than using this word, and I regret that that is the case, but unfortunately that word is the name of a phenomenon that happened and is being addressed. And I regret that we have to use, I regret that that phenomenon is happening and that we then have to use that word. And I wish that that were not the case.
Okay, thank you, David. Your comments are on the record as well. Jane, opening comments from you.
Yeah, good evening. Justice, Council, and DePaul community. My name is Jane Palos, and I serve as the Elections Operations Board, or the EOB, Chair for the Student Government Association. And joining me today are the members of the EOB, that is Ari Reyes, Robbie Merkel, Erica Debelak, and Kelsey Avery. And in today's trial, you're going to be hearing 3 allegations made that involve the Elections Operations Board. And firstly, we are addressing allegation 4, failure by the EOB to notify candidates of election results 3 hours before making that information public in this election in the spring. So just a little bit of background. At 3:21 p.m. on Thursday, May 13th, the day before election results were posted, an information services representative sent me the results of the spring 2021 SGA election in PDF form via email. At this time, I was at my job in downtown Chicago until 5:30 p.m. and then had to make my way to my apartment in Lincoln Park by 6 p.m. for Zoom GB. I had not had time to take a close look at the numbers of the results that evening. So please see Defense Exhibit 1, the email from Information Services that notified me of the results. We can look at the evidence after opening statements. On May 14th, the day the election results were to be posted, I was scheduled to work a 9-hour shift. However, I decided that I needed to stay home and work on getting elections results out as soon as possible because I was not able to retrieve the results any quicker than Information Services got them to me. This was a sacrifice I personally made in order to fulfill my obligations as the EOB chair. So when I finally had a chance to take a look at the document Information Services sent me, I was confused as it was unlike anything they have sent me in the past. The numbers were not calculated automatically. And I also have these exhibits that we'll look at momentarily. Do also keep in mind that the newly implemented constitutional rule requires that percentages and raw numbers of each and every single candidate's vote count have to be released. This means that I myself had to calculate these percentages and numbers as Information Services did not do it for me. So this was not an easy task for me. And in order for the accuracy to be of the highest quality, I had to have multiple people check my math. So between calculating the numbers and percentages, having other people check the math, doing it themselves as well, writing emails to candidates, the process overall took a lot more time than expected. And as a result, we admit that the election results were not able to be sent to candidates at least 3 hours before they were made public. In today's trial, the complainant argues that the EOB failed to uphold its obligations to the EOB bylaws. And we admit that we didn't notify candidates of election results 3 hours before making that information public. But we argue that it was more important for raw numbers and vote percentages to be of the most accurate quality before they were made public. Ultimately, no harm was done to any candidate, organization, petition, or entity as a result of this. In today's trial, the complainant bears the burden of proof, and there is no sufficient evidence that would prove that any harm was done as a result of this. And we strongly urge the Judicial Board to dismiss this allegation.
All right, thank you, Jane. With that, we are going to be moving on to presentation of witnesses, evidence, and testimony. And David, you will be able to go first, but I do want to mention, I meant to mention this earlier. As a general rule in these proceedings today, I want witnesses and parties involved to avoid attacking anyone's character. Not that anybody's done that so far necessarily, but let's just try to stick to, facts and avoid slandering anyone. This is recording and this is public. You can defend your character, just don't attack anyone else's character, please. Okay, with that, we will move on. And David, you have the floor for evidence, witnesses, and testimony.
Okay, I'm pulling up the email for the specific email. I'm not seeing the announcement email. Hold on, give me 1 second. So hit the apologies for this.
Is there anything I can help you find, David?
No, oh, I sent this in a DM. I'm just sending it. This is sorry, I'm running into just a little technical issue here with my mouse is not working right. There we go. This is this email from Kelsey. This is
For any audience members, David is posting evidence in the chat if you would like to take a look.
Let me. I can't find the announcement email that announced the results, but I believe that I have a screenshot that shows the time that the results were posted on. Yeah, Instagram doesn't let you give the doesn't show the timestamp on the.
Okay, real quick.
I mean, I'm sending a
Oh,
screenshot that that shows when I took the screenshot, so I got it. Anyway, okay, so I sent a screenshot of the announcement on Instagram of the results. Again, I don't know if I really need to show that because Jane did concede that that the time frame did not happen. I'm not looking for any sort of sanction. I just really wanted a finding of fact on this because I was really frustrated that EOB, well, at least Kelsey, I don't know if she was representing EOB as a whole, was appealing to the rules and while not following the rules themselves. So really the complaint is about hypocrisy in the communications that I got from Kelsey on behalf of EOB, and I do not know if, I mean, I have no personal complaint to Jane personally, and I'm not looking for any sort of sanction against EOB about this, other than I was really frustrated by the hypocrisy in the communication with Kelsey. So that's all I have to say beyond what I said before.
okay, noted. We've got some hands before I get to you, Jane. Kelsey, what do you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak because I feel as though I've been specifically called out, and I think it's relevant for me to make a point. I think that, David, if you had issue with any emails that I sent you that didn't involve EOB, then I'm upset that EOB had to be involved in something, as you obviously don't seem that upset about that. And that's one thing, but I will say, for myself sending you those emails, that was me, and for context to folks that aren't in SGA in this call, I am Chief Justice of the Judicial Board. I've had to recuse myself from all of these cases because I have conflicts of interest, so Marcus is our acting Chief Justice. I sent that email wearing my hat of Chief Justice to state that I could not issue an injunction with 3 hours notice and no trial. That's just not the way it works. We could go through the J-Board bylaws if we want. That's a whole nother conversation, but I didn't know that I needed to come here today having to defend myself in that way. I thought that we were here solely because of EOB not notifying candidates. So I think that if this is about that email that I sent you, David, that's a totally different conversation, but I really would like to not involve EOB if that's not actually your concern here. Thank you.
Fair enough. I'm sorry if you didn't have proper notice about that, and I did not know how to frame the complaint. It's like kind of hard to frame the complaint because, again, the dispute that we had was not entirely clear that whether that was in your role with J-Board or with EOB, and as I mentioned, I don't really have a problem with EOB in regards to that because, as Jane mentioned, there was no harm. Yeah, I'm not disputing what you are saying and what Jane is saying.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you, Kelsey. Jane, the floor is yours.
Oh, no worries. I'll just mention it in my closing. That's okay.
All right, fair enough. That's all of the comments for David's testimony. Jane, you are allowed to present your witnesses, evidence, and testimony at this moment. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, so David, that was all of your evidence. So, okay, great. So I'm trying to decide, because David said he didn't have any problem, but I'll go ahead and share my evidence anyway. Is there any way you can give me screen sharing abilities, Marcus? Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this is Exhibit 1. If everyone can see my screen, this is just the email that I received. Her name is Tynika. She is from Information Services. This is the initial email was at 3:21 p.m. Where does it say that? 3:21 p.m. on Thursday, May 13th. This has the results from SGA, or from the spring 2021 election. These are sending the PDF of the results. And to show you what that looks like, it's this. And to put it in comparison to what it looked like in the fall, I can show you that in just a moment. So this is what the results looked like. So all of the individual numbers were not calculated at the end to tell me how many people voted in total. So this is just a bunch of pages of what it initially looked like when I was sent this in the spring. What I was sent in the fall looked a little bit different. So that's going to be Exhibit 3. And so Exhibit 3, this is what it looked like. This is from Aaron White. He is also a representative at Information Services at DePaul. This is from October of 2020. So that is from that election. So these numbers look pretty different. The format is different from what I got this quarter. And the reason that I'm bringing these up is because the numbers were not calculated automatically for me this quarter. And we did make a new rule that requires the raw numbers and the percentages to be sent out to candidates. So our main defense here today is that although, is that I wasn't able to get the election results out 3 hours early because it took so long to go through the process of getting all the numbers correctly and accurately out to candidates and out to the public. So I just wanted to show you all this, the difference in what I was used to receiving from Information Services versus what they sent to me this quarter, because it was different people from Information Services. Not shaming them, nothing wrong with Information Services. Just wanted to show you all just a little bit of evidence of what it looked like last quarter versus this quarter, and how the newly implemented rule kind of hindered my ability to get out the results on time. That is all the evidence that we're going to be presenting for allegation 4 today.
Okay, thank you, Jane. We didn't have any witnesses per se, but David, do you have any response to the evidence that was presented?
Thank you for sharing that, Jane. I appreciate the burden of the new rules, and hopefully we can work with Information Services to make that process more smooth in the future. And I may have completely misframed my complaint based on a misunderstanding of the role of Kelsey, who has not been given the opportunity to be part of it. So we're not talking about Kelsey, and thank you for sharing that context. It's very useful.
All right, thank you, David. With that, we will move to closing statements for this portion. David, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Well, Kelsey made the very important point that I may have just misframed this completely. And since Kelsey is not being the object of complaint here, I don't really have anything to say about that. And I guess, I mean, this is a really a weird way to start the meeting, but I guess I could say, I mean, I don't know if I should say I'm not making a complaint against EOB, so I may have misframed it. I don't know if that's formally withdrawing the complaint, but I don't have, it was a problem with the communication with Kelsey, and if her communication was not within the context of EOB, then I don't actually have a complaint. So,
okay.
Anticlimactic first closing statement.
That's fair. I am willing to recognize you withdrawing your complaint for the sake of, procedure. Jane, do you have any closing remarks?
I did have closing remarks, actually. I don't feel as though they are necessary to say anymore. I suppose that I would remind the justice and the judges of this allegation today, that the allegation brought forth today is that the elections board failed to notify candidates of election results 3 hours before making that information public. That was an attack completely on the elections board. So I think it's important that if that was going to be an allegation, then it should have been gone through with. So obviously, I urge the justice and the judges to dismiss this. Clearly, David has withdrawn. Regardless, let's just remember that EOB was as diligent as they could have possibly been this quarter. And yeah, we urge you to just dismiss this. Thank you.
Okay, noted. David, I do see your hand quickly.
I just wanted to say if Jane would prefer that the complaint not technically be withdrawn and that EOB formally have, or that it be formally dismissed, I'm fine with that as well, considering that it appears that it may have been my error in framing and misunderstanding Kelsey's role in that email. I'm quite, if Jane would prefer that it not be formally withdrawn and instead be formally dismissed for the purpose of exonerating EOB in this complaint, I'm totally fine with that as well.
Okay, noted. Thank you. And yeah, we'll take that in consideration. I don't know if I am. I'm not going to just say we're dismissing it, but I would imagine that's going to be the outcome for this one. So with that, we will move on to allegation number 1. And that is failure by the SGA Vice President to uphold their constitutional duty by not holding constitutional revisions in the hearing quarter of 2021. And with that, we will hold an open forum. Does anybody have any comments or questions regarding this allegation? Cindy, what do you have?
I just wanted clarification because I remember this being brought up at a general body that we had. And I thought Alyssa had apologized for that publicly as well as Watfa. So I'm very confused as to like why would I thought that was resolved at that GB. So why is this continuing to here if I thought that if like both people and like the people who are in CRB made a public apology?
I personally can't answer that, but that did happen, and yeah,
Oh, okay.
That's not directly, you know, what the claim is alleging.
Okay.
That's all I would say about that. Does anybody else have anything? Okay. Well then, with that, we will move on to opening statements. So, David, do you have any opening statements for this one?
Okay, so I think that CRB is a very important function of SGA because we need to remember the big picture that the function of SGA is ultimately to serve the student body, and the constitutional revision process is it's Constitutional Revision Board. The Constitutional Revision process is an important avenue for the student body to make themselves to provide feedback, to make their opinions known to GB in a formal capacity and have their feedback acted on in an official capacity. For context, the reason that I brought this complaint, I did in fact bring this up in GB, and when I brought it up, I was told first, Watfa told me that there had been a group decision to not meet or not to not meet or to not solicit revisions or something to that extent. Kelsey messaged me about what it was. Then where the rules were that they had to meet, and then I brought it up later in the meeting, and Alyssa appealed to the rules that I had told Kelsey about, which suggested that there is some conversation happening on behind the scenes, which is not a problem in and of itself. But Alyssa said that CRB had in fact met, and that they had merely not solicited revisions based on an extremely narrow literal interpretation of the rules saying that they had to meet and that they did not have to solicit revisions. However, I spoke to another member of CRB, and the other member of CRB said that it was not in fact a group decision, and that they also had not in fact met. And I obtained screenshots of the Slack chat, which showed that it was not in fact a group decision, and that there was no indication that CRB did in fact meet. And I made the complaint because A, I had important constitutional revisions to propose, and this is an important avenue for people like me who are in fact not members of SGA, although I will be presumably shortly, but I am not at the moment, and as a non-member, I have very limited formal avenues for doing things, and this is a very important avenue. And as I mentioned several times already, I have experienced people in SGA using appeals to the rules as a way of deflecting legitimate concerns. And when I brought this up, the fact that I was told that it was a group decision and that CRB had in fact met appeared to both be misrepresentations. And again, the phenomenon of bringing up a concern and being told, no, that didn't actually happen. The phenomenon that Cindy has asked that not be referred to, it's just part of an ongoing frustration that I have felt when I've tried to bring up legitimate, important concerns in GB, that I just get bullshitted away. Like, people just bullshit to not address them. And I did, as Cindy observed, bring this up politely in GB, and I got a bullshit response that appears to have been not true, and it really pissed me off. And I mean, not like really pissed me off, but I was a bit salty about it. And this was literally the only avenue available to me to address that. It seems like a bit of an escalation, but there really isn't anything between politely bringing things up and making a formal complaint as far as avenues available to the general public to address these things. I am not asking for anything beyond just a formal finding of fact, and that they did not in fact meet, assuming that they didn't, because maybe it is possible to produce documentation that they did meet. I don't know. I haven't seen any, and I was told that there wasn't any evidence that they met. And I also would like for J-Board to find that the CRB process is in fact important and that they should have met. But I'm not looking for any formal consequences beyond a finding that they did not meet and that they should have met, and that the failure to meet was a failure, and that matters. I don't know if that's, no, I can send the screenshots of the Slack channel. It'll just take me a second to pull them up.
No, yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Well, that'll be the next portion. Sorry, not to cut you off.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No worries.
None of us are lawyers here except maybe Johnny a little bit. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Opening remarks are on the record. Watfa, would you like to make opening remarks as well?
Sure. Really quick before I start, I do want to say that if there's no formal, not that I want formal consequences, but I do think a lot of this could have been avoided by simply having a conversation. But I'm just to put that on the record. But I wrote my statements out just because for the sake of time. I didn't want to waste anyone's time. But I did want to thank everyone for taking time out of our schedules throughout like finals and everything going on in the world to make space for this. I know we have a lot going on in and outside DePaul, and this is like a new type of experience for all of us. So I really appreciate the effort that went into it. I'd like to consider myself as like an understanding, approachable, and empathetic person. And one of my primary initiatives when I ran for vice president was to make SGA a fun and safe place for everyone again, especially after last year when it wasn't really the case. Melissa and I worked on this throughout the year, and it's extremely disheartening to see that individuals have persisted in making it an unsafe environment and uncomfortable for some of our members. There's no doubt that this year has been very difficult. Personally, spring quarter was one of my hardest quarters from my entire time at DePaul. And throughout all this difficulty, I was very transparent about what I was going through. I delegated when needed, and I addressed when I needed to step away from the role. I, this past month, wrapped up the month of Ramadan, so I wrapped up my month of fasting and watched my community struggle simultaneously while our country got completely torn apart. And on May 13th, which was Eid, I spent it with my family, and we agreed that it was necessary for us to celebrate the small joys that we had, especially given the circumstances with what we were going through. But unfortunately, my day with my family and my friends was quickly ruined. It was my first Eid in a year because of the pandemic that was somewhat normal. I was able to sit in my grandparents' house. I was able to have dinner with them. And I got a J-Board email, and it definitely triggered a lot of anxiety, and I had to leave, and I went home and I called some friends, and I was not in a good mood anymore. And that was one of my 2 holidays all year that I got to enjoy myself. So I'm honestly just disgusted by the fact that this is all happening at a time where no one really needs it. Yeah, like the complaints against me, while they seem like an attempt for accountability, are honestly ridiculous given everything else that all of us have to really deal with. And as I mentioned, there was no conversation. I was constantly called out for these things. And I would have much rather been open to setting a meeting, having a conversation, explaining myself, instead of all of us kind of taking time out of our very busy schedules to sit here and go through it all. But in terms of CRB, we did hold a review session over Slack. And the screenshots, David, you have the screenshots. I have the screenshots too. I'm in the Slack too, so I can provide those as well. Everyone's input was considered in the Slack before we proceeded to present the tabled amendments to general body. It doesn't say that we have to send out a new form for new amendments to be proposed. All it says is we have to consider them every quarter if they come in, but it doesn't say we have to go out and seek them. And I think it's extremely immature and upsetting that when I was vulnerable to CRB and I mentioned that I was experiencing burnout, which were my exact words, that they were sent to parties outside of our private channel without my consent. Those screenshots were sent to people that aren't in that channel. That channel is a private channel, and I was not informed until I got them sent to me in the J-Board email. We will see later, but the precedent was sent that CRB typically does not meet during spring quarter because of the time restraint, and it takes away from our ability to serve our students. And actually, Wesley, last year on April 9th, in one of the cabinet meetings, said that the bylaws state that we have to have amendments at least once a quarter, but CRB could choose to propose 0 amendments and tell people not to send any in. Those were his exact words from the minutes. And he said that CRB at their next meeting could be considered a revision meeting as they finished up amendments that were from the following quarter, the previous quarter that were not considered. So I do believe I did my best. We held a meeting. It'll be talked about later. I have a couple witnesses that are going to talk about how the process went in the Slack. But I also would just like everyone to consider the timing of these concerns, because it's obvious who benefits from me being put on the spot like this. The parties involved in this entire situation have had a problem with my leadership all year. And despite me being respectful and forgiving and empathetic, they insisted on making things difficult for me. I personally have 100 better things to do than sit here and defend myself, which I have done multiple times on multiple occasions. I've spent the past month organizing and advocating for my community. I have spent time the past year advocating for our students. And in my opinion, this is a waste of our time. And it's preventing our new cabinet from beginning work to serve our students, which we've been trying to do for the past 2 weeks and haven't been able to. So those are my opening remarks. I apologize for their length, but I do think they were important.
No apologies necessary, Watfa. Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move on to evidence, witnesses, and testimony. And once again, David, you are up first. And I do have a request. if you have evidence to show like you did last time, if we can, I'll give you co-host privileges. If you can screen share, I think that would be easier for everybody to see, including phone users.
Okay, let me, that's gonna take me a second to put them in a place where I can do screen sharing. Okay, I have it. How do you want me to do the,
Sure. Okay, I will make you a co-host, and then if you can just screen share.
okay. A second. Got a lot of windows up in here. Here we go. Okay, so this is what I have. Oh, these are out of order, but as I understand it, and as the screenshot shows, WAFA proposed not to meet. And here, let's see. Where it is. Saying I'd like to avoid adding an extra meeting to all our plates. So please, everyone, respond respond with their opinion on the following. So, and then there were responses, but ultimately, no one else said anything about not meeting, as far as I saw. And I have not seen any evidence that there was a meeting beyond this. And I think that, I don't think that a Slack meeting constitutes a meeting. And there's the technicality of not taking, or whether or not they actually have to solicit feedback or solicit input. Again, I tried to bring this up. I also brought up, because I had specifically, there was an issue that I had about the Constitution appealing to people being required to follow the law, which is something that is used, the law and order politics are used to marginalize all sorts of vulnerable groups. And I thought that it was a huge problem that SGA has an appeal to law and order politics in its constitution, and it was really important for me to bring this up. I had forgotten to bring it up at the I'd forgotten to bring it up previous quarter because I didn't know how the process worked at the time. And I had, so it had been really important for me to bring this up. And so was frustrated that I didn't have the opportunity to bring it up. Well, when I brought it up in the meeting, I was like, so when are we going to have this so I can present this important thing? And there was an appeal to the rules about why they could not hear my proposal and why they had not heard my proposal at the same time as like apparently breaking the rules. So, and again, I brought this up politely, and I know that bringing it to J-Board is a huge escalation. An important thing to keep in mind here is that there is a very extreme power differential between the president and the vice president and just random members of the student body. And Watfez mentioned that she would have liked that I had brought this up with her, and I did bring it up in the GB meeting. And I got, about the actual core issue, I got a deflection. I mean, she gave an explanation, which is, I'm quite sympathetic to the explanation, because obviously the past month and a half-ish have been very difficult for Palestinians, and beyond that, this year has been difficult for people of Asian and Pacific Islander descent as well. Not to mention it's been hard for all of us, and I would rather have not had to bring this to J-Board, but I tried to bring this up separately, and I received a deflection response that ultimately appeared to appeal to something that was not true. And this was the only avenue available. And I also brought this up because I was already filing much more serious allegations. And so I thought, might as well address them while we're at it. I wish that this had been able to be addressed when I brought it up initially in the forum where members of the student body who are not part of SGA have the opportunity to bring these kinds of things up. And I wish it had been addressed then, but it was not really addressed. I mean, there was a reason given, and I'm sympathetic to that reason, but the actual accepting CRB, or whether the actual substance of CRB itself not meeting and the communication about that is what my complaint is about. And it really seems to come down to the question of, does a Slack discussion count as a meeting? And I don't think it counts as a meeting. It is apparent that Wafa says that she believes that the Slack discussion does count in a meeting, and that appears to be really the only question at stake. I think that it was that there was harm in not holding CRB, because again, I wanted to bring up removing this problematic law and order language that it disproportionately impacts marginalized groups. And I had tried to bring it up multiple times before. Actually, when I forgot to bring it up in the winter quarter, I asked around, well, I forgot to bring this up. Can we bring this up? And I don't remember who told me, but someone told me, someone from SGA told me, oh, well, just bring it up next quarter instead. So I diligently waited to bring it up till the next quarter, and then I had no opportunity to bring it up. And like so basically, for people who don't know, in the SGA Constitution, there is a rule that SGA members have to follow laws at all times. Local, state, federal, and laws and university regulations. And there is a long history of the law being used to punish people, marginalized people, for things that are basically bullshit prosecutions. Also things that should not be illegal are illegal. I mean, with protests, protesters routinely get arrested and prosecuted for bullshit things like breaking the peace, or there's a handful of things. It varies where you are, but the local prosecutors will find things to prosecute protesters for. There also in regards to undocumented students, the whole issue with immigration laws in the United States are that they are discriminatory. And so like appealing to, you have to follow the law when we are in a country that has discriminatory immigration laws that are highly problematic for a number of reasons is something that we shouldn't have in our Constitution. Also, until 2002, being gay was illegal in parts of the country. There are a lot of reasons why we should not appeal to it. Again, that's not the point of the complaint, but I'm just saying that I had a very important thing to bring up that affects marginalized people, including myself. And I tried to bring it up politely. I tried to bring it up to the proper channels. And unfortunately, this was the only avenue available to me to bring it up. And it brought me no pleasure to bring this to J-Board. I would have preferred to handle this otherwise, but I exhausted other avenues for handling it. And I mean, I guess I could have emailed people about it, but there's a huge power differential. The president, the vice president, there's some, it's kind of intimidating to reach out. And so I tried to bring it up as politely as possible. Hi, Ari. I am not in fact perpetuating the narrative that undocumented people are illegal. I am simply stating that federal immigration law does in fact exist, and that when we have a rule that requires people to follow the law, the correlation is being made by you. It is not being made by me. I did not say that people are illegal. I am saying that there is federal immigration law that is a problem, and that we have a rule that requires people to follow the. I'm responding to the comments, and can we please just not do the comments, because this is totally not what this is about.
David, I'm going to address that. Yes, I hear you. Can we please not do back and forth in the comments? I'm not going to comment on, how valid the comments in the chat are, or, truthful or justified, but they aren't addressing anything directly relevant to the case right now, and it's serving as a bit of a distraction. I just want to keep this thing efficient and get to the heart of the issues. Okay, I was just saying that I had very, very important CRB things to bring up that do in fact affect marginalized people. I mean, I am a marginalized person. I mean, I'm not going to do oppression Olympics here, but I'm also a marginalized person as a very, very disabled LGBT queer, genderqueer person. So it was important to me to bring up a constitutional revision to get rid of a constitutional thing that negatively affects marginalized people. And I tried to bring this up politely. I brought this up through the appropriate venues as politely as I could, and I got a deflection that appeared to be based on a misrepresentation of fact, and this was the only avenue that I had further to address it. So that's all I have to say. Okay, thank you, David. And thank you everyone in the audience for acknowledging my request. Misa, your hand was up. Do you still have anything to say? Okay. All right, well then we will move on to Watfa. Would you like to cross-examine anything David presented, or would you like to just go on to your evidence?
I would just like to say one thing, and then I have witnesses. I don't know if that's the right order,
That's
but
fine.
when I meant conversation, I meant like not calling me out in front of a room of 30 people, right? Everyone that I've worked with this past year who I've had conversations with has been much more productive. I appreciate, I mean, I understand, I don't appreciate, I understand you saying like you sympathize with how I was going through a difficult time. As a Palestinian, I've been going through a difficult time my entire life. It didn't just escalate this past month. But I would have appreciated, like I said, a conversation. I was always taught you call in, you don't call out, you reach out to someone on the side, you don't call them out in front of a room of people. And that's how true leadership is. But I have 2 witnesses. So Marcus, is that like the right order? I just call on witnesses?
As far as I'm concerned, yeah, that's fine. Go for it.
Cool. Okay, my first witness is Alyssa. So I have like questions prepped, and then we'll just go from there. So Alyssa, if you want to like introduce yourself in your position, pronouns, and then we'll keep going.
Hey everyone, my name is Alyssa, she, her, hers, and I believe I'm former president of SGA.
Cool. Okay. First question, I'm kind of going to combine 2 of them. How long have you been in SGA, and throughout those years, how many times was CRB conducted during spring quarter?
Yeah, so I've been part of SGA my whole DePaul career, so starting freshman year. So that makes 4 years, and I believe it is we've never had, well, sorry, let me rephrase that. So the first year was under Michael as president. We did not have CRB that spring quarter. Second year was under Nahal. We did not have CRB that quarter. Third year was under Giselle. We did have CRB that quarter. If my memory serves me correctly, we ended up having an emergency meeting in order to have constitutional revisions board. And before that, it initially wasn't planned. And so usually the interpretation and the precedent sent before us was that CRB didn't really accept revisions spring quarter and didn't hold revisions. Looking back at our constitution, it does say that we have to have a meeting for that. Constitutional Revisions Board does have to meet every quarter at least once. So that was something that I saw in the past, but something that we were trying to fix this year.
Cool, thank you. Just a couple more. Do you think the accusations are justified given the circumstances and the responses that were given during general body?
I do not think they were justified at all. First of all, as mentioned before this trial started, I think Cindy mentioned it, we had already discussed it in GB, so I thought that was it. I did apologize severely. I apologized for, I think, like 2 to 3 minutes about how we navigated this situation, just because I was understanding that it wasn't completely clear based off how past years had done it. I wasn't expecting there to be a spring CRB, so I was kind of caught by surprise, realizing that we probably did have to have a CRB, and trying to navigate that situation. I had also mentioned in my apology to GB, I believe it was our second to last meeting or third to last meeting, that the reason that we were struggling the reason why we didn't open up to new revisions was because both Watfa and I, as women of color, were struggling in our communities. And I think it would just be really appreciated if there was a sort of compassion from other folks, realizing that I'm coming from the Apita community, Watfa as a Palestinian, our communities have been attacked this past spring quarter and the end of winter quarter. Well, our whole lifetimes, basically. But it made it extremely harder to focus and give our attention to every minute, small detail of SGA. So it was just difficult in proceeding and dealing with all of those different situations. But I did want to say that I apologized, that it might have not been as clear and we could have been more clear. But I forgot the question that Watfa had asked. But if I answered your question, hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, you did. Thank you so much. And the last 2 questions, I feel weird asking this one, but like, what was your experience like working with me throughout the time that you've known me? And do you think these accusations affect my ability to be a good president next year?
Not at all, because this only has to deal with one aspect, and you did follow it. We're not saying that Because if you interpret the Constitution, it doesn't say anything about having to open it to new revision. So you did follow it, you did have a meeting, and you did consult with CRB about how to proceed. So you followed all of the rules correctly. And outside of CRB, because your role is much more than CRB, and it also shows that you have constantly supported marginalized communities, just also working with you when I was your EVP in Student Affairs and you were Senator for Community Students, and then now this relationship of President and Vice President. So I know that you're more than capable of leading as president. This does not affect you at all. You know the Constitution very well. You've read through it millions of times. And I just think that a lot of people, unfortunately, we both experienced this, we're under a microscope being women of color. As president and vice president, a lot of people were just looking for us to screw up and always called attention to it when we screwed up, a lot of the times publicly. But despite it all, you are resilient. And so I just really blown away with how powerful you are, and excited to see you as president next year.
Thanks, you're so nice. Right back at you. We got through a lot this year. I know it didn't look like it, but like behind the scenes, we sent a lot of screaming voice notes to each other. But thank you, Alyssa. Next, I'm gonna move on to Johnny as my second witness. So Johnny, same first question, name, pronouns, position, and how long you've been involved in SGA.
Hey everyone, my name is Johnny Milas. Since there hasn't been an inauguration, I'm gonna still say I am the Senator for 4th and 5th year students, he, him pronouns. I think that was all of my intro I needed.
And then how long were you involved at SGA, sorry?
I've been in SGA since my sophomore year, so I believe that would have been the 2018-2019 school year.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so first question, for those people who aren't familiar with constitutional revisions, how do our CRB meetings work and what is the purpose of them?
So the broad purpose of CRB, Constitutional Revisions Board, is to revise the Constitution if people, the most glaring example is if people want to add new senators. People want new senators, want to remove language, that is the time to do it. We hold it every term. If there are amendments proposed, we review them as a small group prior to it. I believe there are 7 of us on the committee this term or this year. And then we screen those, might change some language. If they're very similar ones, we combine them. And then anything that we believe is important enough or deserves a look by GB, we will send forward to the general body.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. Next question is, in terms of spring quarter, 2 questions. Did we technically have CRB? And did CRB as a board have a meeting this term?
So I have been under the impression that we did meet. I don't know, I can pull up the Slack message and go through it, but as far as I have been concerned, and as far as I know, Slack has been a formal communication channel of SGA. We have held votes in there. We have done other official SGA business through that. And so that's what I assumed this was. It was stated that since we had 2 amendments that we had to go over, in lieu of having another Zoom meeting for an hour, we were just going to discuss them through Slack. People, everybody gave responses, I believe, and we went forward from that. So I've been under the impression that if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. So we've had a meeting.
Cool, thank you. And then in terms of like the language in the chat, I guess 2 more questions. What was discussed in the chat? And then the language of avoid an extra meeting, what did that like mean to you as you read it?
Okay, can I share my screen if we're going over the language? Or I don't know, Wafa, if you have privileges or want to pull it up.
I think you just got co-host privilege, so.
Oh, cool. So. So I believe this is, let's see the date here. This is April 18th. WATFA sent this out saying that we had the 2 amendments to go over, the land acknowledgement statement from OIDE and the election signature. And so we went through that, and She said in lieu of having, or where's the official language? To avoid having an extra meeting, can everybody please respond with their opinions? And so the way I interpret is that is we're using the Slack channel as an official means of communication, and that everything is going to be going through here. I like this one, Cami liked this one, both members of CRB. This is this closed Slack channel, so everybody in here is a member of CRB. Watfa sent in his, or Wesley, my mistake, sent in his, I guess, support for the OID as well as for the election signature. And we had 5 responses to that: Watfa, Kelsey, Misa, and myself, as well as we have 2 replies over on this side from Kelsey, who completely agrees, with 2 reactions. I think that's what these are called, from Cami and Misa. And then Watfa, Cami, and Misa agreed. And then I responded, basically stating the same thing. I did give a little bit of like a dissent, essentially, saying, you know, we could lower it before, but it's not a big deal. 2 reactions to that, Watfa and Misa. And so then we said we were going to present them to GB, and we can fix it as is later. If they wanted to fix the signatures, they can. We got 4 reactions to that. So based on that, I assumed we were having a real, an actual meeting. I know that answered part of your question. What else was there?
Just the language of like avoid an extra meeting, like what that meant to you.
Oh yeah, that to me meant instead of getting on Zoom, we're just going to do it through Slack.
Cool, thank you. And then one other question: does CRB have to like solicit new amendments every term? So do they need to send out? I know traditionally we do a Google form for people to send things in. Does that have to happen every quarter?
No, as far as I know, and I believe I checked in preparation for this, there's nothing in the bylaws that say we have to solicit new amendments. It has traditionally been done that we have sent out a Google form, and usually that is when, for the past 2 years, or my first 2 years in SGA, we would receive anywhere from 30 to 100 proposed amendments. And that was just the best means of handling them, and that was up to the vice president at that time. This year, we have only received maybe a dozen in total. And so we sent out a Google form for the fall and winter, and then this time, since we only had 2 rolling over and the low number in total, we didn't do it. Anything that comes to CRB as a proposed amendment from any student, we have to review. Wesley sent an amendment in, I believe, the fall that came through an email versus coming through the Slack channel, and we did, or versus coming through the Google form, and we looked at it just the same and addressed it just, the same as any other things that would have come through the Google form.
Cool, thank you. And then one last question: do you think this case has like standing in your opinion, based on everything we discussed?
No, I mean, I've been under the impression, and I'm still under the impression, that we hosted a CRB meeting. And so as a member of CRB, we met in our official capacity. We did what we had to do, and there has been no reason to believe otherwise. And I think the one legal hook that I was told for why this case would have standing doesn't make sense, since it's under a restriction that said you can only propose amendments during fall, winter, and spring. That seems more of a timetable versus an obligation.
Cool. Thank you, Johnny. That's all I have. So I'm gonna pass it back to Marcus.
Okay, thank you, Watfa. David, you now have an opportunity to cross-examine both witnesses Watfa called. Would you like to do that?
Can I bring additional evidence? I want to respond to something she said.
Sure.
Okay. So there are 2 things I think that are really the source of contention in the discussion. One is whether or not a Slack discussion is considered a meeting, and the other has to do with it, not really the core of what the complaint is, but about whether this was addressed properly, whether you know, about the power structures in place. And I was looking back after Watfa made her comments, and I would say that I find Watfa intimidating. And after CRB last time, I sent her a bunch of comments, and she didn't really substantively respond to the comments about the CRB stuff that I sent her last time over iMessage. And she specifically said in her message, these changes can be proposed spring quarter. And as an outsider, I assumed that that would mean that that would be sent a link to a Google form. And so the appeal to, well, I could have sent in things by, I don't know, just emailing them randomly to CRB. I don't know that. I mean, I didn't know that. I'm an outsider. I just assumed the procedure would be the same. I can share. Should I share my my conversation history with the iMessage, or I don't know. It's a private conversation, and so I think of comments in the chat. The question is whether, so do we want to go with an extremely legalistic interpretation, in which case I can pull out Robert's rules and show that Robert's rules says that that Slack is not considered a meeting, which seems to be kind of missing the point. Or should I go with the more, what seems to really be the contention here, which is power structures. And I can go both avenues, but I mean, going with a super pedantic Robert Rules says that Slack isn't a meeting seems to be kind of missing the point. And I think that it's substantially more salient that, in a university with 20,000 people, 20,000 students, the head of the student government and the two most powerful students in the university are kind of intimidating. And I had been texting with Watfa, but I was looking back and we didn't ever chat again after she didn't respond to my complaints about the CRB process last time, my concern about the CRB process last time, which is kind of relevant here because she said I should have contacted her when I tried that before. She never addressed my complaints, and there is the really intimidating power difference here because of her role in SGA, and so trying the same kind of communication yet again that didn't work last time doesn't seem like a reasonable thing for me to try to do. I mean, I tried to bring up CRB concerns with her previously and didn't get a result. It was a completely unrelated CRB stuff. It was stuff last quarter, but and after that I was kind of like intimidated because I hadn't gotten an answer after trying to bring stuff up, so I just hadn't tried again, and that's why I brought it up very indirectly, very politely. It was not a call out. I in the meeting, in the GB, I was like, I tried to bring it up in a non-accusatory way, and I only brought up this is the requirement after I got deflective responses, like people deflecting and not giving me an answer. So my question is really, because this is it's a private conversation, and between me and Watfa, I wanted to give her the opportunity of whether she would prefer that I share the conversation or that I give her the opportunity to concede the contents without it being shared, because that might be preferential to her, and she could concede that characterization of the conversation without me having to share the conversation, and that might be preferential to her. Marcus is.
Okay, yeah, we have your comments on record.
I mean, I can document them by showing conversation in a screen sharing, or if WATFA would prefer to me not to share them, not to share the conversation on screen sharing, then it might be preferential to her to concede my characterization of that conversation. And so I was wondering if I don't know. I'm asking you because you're the person presiding, but I could also
if it's
just
permissible.
no, I'm just ask WATFA. WATFA, would you rather that I share the conversation, or would you rather just concede to my characterization?
I would just like to say, oh, sorry, Marcus. Am I good?
Yep.
I would just like to say my private conversations have already been exposed to everybody already. We had a private Slack channel. You somehow managed to get it. I already know who it's from, but like I'm surprised to hear privacy matters at this point, but whatever. Anyway, we're on a time crunch. We have 2 more cases to get through. People can believe what they want to believe about the messages. I don't think it's worth sharing them. But all I'd like to say is that Alyssa and I had set the precedent also that people email us with things they want to work on for SGA. Whether it's Johnny, Alyssa, Kevin, like they're my closest friends in SGA. Like if it's SGA business, we email each other. We don't text each other about it. So I'm not the best texter, especially when I'm busy, but if I get an email about something, I respond right away. And most people in the university know if they need to get a hold of me, they don't ask for my number, they email me. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. I don't have the conversations from before when this conversation like first happened, but I do know after CRB met winter quarter, I did fill you in on the decisions that were made, which I didn't have to do either. I just told CRB because you weren't in those discussions, I wanted to inform you on what we discussed about the proposed amendments that you had. But again, I didn't even have the responsibility to do that. I took time out of my day and I made that a point for me to do that. That's all I'm gonna say on that. But yeah, that's it, sorry.
Okay, thank you, WATFA. And David, I just did want to make absolutely sure that you didn't want to cross-examine any of the witnesses.
They answered everything that I wanted to say.
Okay.
WATFA more responded to what I said than answered my question. So I'm going to take that she is not conceding my characterization.
That's a no, don't share the messages, thank you.
Well, if you are not conceding the characterization, then the only alternative is for me to share the message.
I'm sorry, whoa. Consent, I said no sharing the messages. Consent is very straightforward. I said don't share the messages. I'm not worried about what's in them. I'm worried about the sake of time. And I just said
claiming that I didn't characterize them accurately. And
you know what, go for it. It's fine. It's really fine.
One or the other.
It's really fine. You know what? Share it. It's just at the sake of everyone else's time. I personally have to go at 9 p.m. So then we'll probably just have to push this to next week. But it's fine. Whatever.
Okay. Yeah. So in the message that I shared, I put it in the Slack. No, not Slack. I put it in the. Hold on. How do I get this?
So I just want to say, David, you've given us the characterization of the remarks, and it's.
I put it in the chat.
It's in the chat, yeah. So I would say we can.
It is evidence, I am putting this because she has repeatedly said I should have communicated with her, and I am saying I did communicate with her. She did not respond to my concerns that I brought up, lengthy concerns. If other SGA members know that email is the best way to contact her, I'm not an SGA member. I didn't know that. I had only communicated with her over like primarily over text, a tiny bit over Instagram maybe. I find email really intimidating. And again, I'm not an SGA member. I'm an outsider. The entire student body knows that. That's something that you're going to have to, like, you know, all 20,000 people in the school know that. Can we also please just end with the heckling? Thanks. I'm saying I did try to bring this up, and I have tried to communicate with WAFA about CRB privately, and I did not get a response either way to the concerns that I brought up through those channels. And like I said, bringing this to J-Board was not my first choice. I have attempted to bring this up in other ways, and it has not succeeded. Also, one second.
In the interest of time, I just want to make sure everyone involved is looking at, making their comments succinct. Really quick, Johnny, you have your hand up.
I actually also wanted to share one more thing, which I have. Can you give me screen sharing again?
What are you going to share?
Robert's rules defining meetings as oral communication, as AURAL.
Okay.
Simply because we had a number of witnesses say that it does count as a communication, and this is under Robert's Rules of Order, Deliberative Assembly. It's types in their rules, and we have here the group meets in a single room or area under equivalent conditions of opportunity for simultaneous oral, as in spoken auditory communication among all participants. And I agree that that is totally pedantic, but if we are going to go with that line of questioning, we follow Robert's rules. Robert's rules says that it is not a meeting. That's not the main contention. The main contention is that I tried to bring things up and was not able to. And I brought this up in a meeting, and I was told something that, at least by the Robert's Rules definition, was a false deflection, and that's why I brought this here. So, under Robert's Rules, they could have just had like a 5-minute Zoom call or something. But again, my primary contention is not about meeting as much as WAFA told me, bring these up next quarter. And then I waited for the opportunity to bring it up. And then when I asked about it, they were like, oh, well, we didn't actually do that. So that's the core contention and power differential. I'm just some rando student with no formal position whatsoever. The vice president is the second most powerful student in a group of 20,000 people. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, David. All right, I'm gonna let Johnny go, and then I'm gonna make a quick announcement. Johnny, you have the floor.
I'm a witness, but part of my statement, I think, was attacked. And so if this is allowed, I would like to say it. First, I would like to enter evidence to show that SGA has used Slack in other official capacities to hold votes and conduct SGA business. Also, the word, I'm not trying to get into pedantics, I'm not trying to do it, but I Googled the definition for oral, and it also says or in database form. And I think Slack would count as a database. So we're in a pandemic, we have to adapt and modify. We are technically all sharing the same space, so it is there. That's it. I don't know if I can share my screen to show that we've used Slack for other votes and actually official business. If not, I'll drop it.
Do you have a citation for that definition if you're going to appeal to an outside definition?
Well, I Googled it.
That's not a citation. Robert's Rules of Order are an actual citation. And yeah, I mean, can we out pedantic each other is really completely losing the point of all of this, but both sides are being extremely pedantic. So if you're going to appeal to an outside definition, please share it.
Thank you, guys. Johnny, if you can find a link, feel free to post that. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. I think we've all heard everything we need to hear. So from here on, I would like people to try and keep things directly relevant to the allegations at hand. And if I hear people start to get into, veer off on an extended tangent, I'm going to try and wrangle it back in. And if it doesn't stop, I'll mute. I don't want to, that's a little bit violent, so I don't want to use that, but I'm trying to respect everybody's time and keep everything relevant. David, quickly.
And can you please ask people to stop heckling in the chat?
Yeah, actually, I did want to say that again. Yeah, there was a little bit of comments from the peanut gallery. Yeah, please just keep that to an absolute minimum, guys. Your comments aren't unwelcome, but please just try to keep it civil, especially if it's distracting to any of the parties involved. That can just make this end up taking longer.
It is highly distracting when people are refuting what someone is saying while they are saying it in the chat. If someone has something that is being shared while they have the floor, that's one thing. But basically, people are sharing hot takes in the chat, and it's really distracting, and it makes this process even more intimidating for me as an outsider who is not used to these kinds of proceedings. And as a disabled person, I find it really overwhelming.
Okay, thank you, David. Your concerns are noted. Also, generally, please let me acknowledge you before you talk, not speaking to anybody in particular, but that would make this go much more smoothly as well. Okay, so would you guys like to make closing remarks, or should we consider what just happened closing remarks and move on to the next allegation?
If the complainant goes first with the closing remarks, honestly, what I just, that's basically, it can be my closing remarks. If I was to go first.
Thank you, David.
Counting.
Okay, Watfa, would you like to make any closing remarks?
No, I'm good, thanks.
All right, I would like to propose a 2-minute break. If everybody would like a screen break, we can come back at 7:48. If y'all prefer we just keep going and save the 2 minutes, we can do that as well. If you would like to keep going, raise your hand. Okay, we've got a few. Okay, we've got several. All right, we won't take a break. Okay, one moment while I switch my tabs real quick.
Marcus, do you need a break? It's okay if you do.
I would like to have the opportunity to have a short break. And I mean, we had, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 people raising their hand, but that's out of 48 people in the chat, or in the room. So
that's fair. I didn't count. Yeah. Okay. Let's just take a quick 2-minute break. I'm sorry, guys. I know y'all want to get it over with, but I think people will be more energized and able to do it quickly if we take a break. So you can shut your screen off, and 7:49 on the dot.
Thank you, Marcus.
You're all welcome.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks, Marcus.
All right, that was quick, but it is 7:49, so I'm going to call everyone back in. All of the comments in the chat are very nice. I appreciate it. It's doing a lot for me. Okay, looks like we are filtering back in. Okay, we are going to move on to allegation number 3, or sorry, allegation number 2, my apologies. This concerns 2 spring SGA candidates allegedly breaking EOB bylaws by accessing their candidate information form before the time allowed, and in parallel negligence on behalf of the EOB, Election Operations Board, to notice this alleged breaking of the bylaws. So first off, we are going to do a quick open forum again. Do we have any comments, questions? Anybody need clarification on any of the terms we've used? I see Johnny.
Ignore me.
I'm ignoring you, Johnny. Jane.
Yes, so since the EOB and WAFA were both the defendants in this, do we each get our own opening statements, right?
EOB, WATFA, and actually Adora.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll give you each individually. The EOB, Omar, is the Election Operations Board. There we go, Kelsey.
Okay, thanks.
You are welcome, Jane. My mouth isn't working anymore. Okay, if we have no other questions or comments, we will go ahead and move on to opening statements. Last call. Okay. All right. Complainant is allowed to make opening statement here. So David, you have the floor.
Hi, again. During the election, I became aware that WATFA had submitted her campaign application or her candidacy application before it was available to the general public. And then I later became aware that Adora had also submitted hers early. And there's an empirical advantage in elections to being listed first on the ballot, and SGA has a policy of listing people on the ballot based on when they completed their candidacy application requirements. And apparently this has been discussed in SGA in the past. I don't know, I wasn't there, so I can't really, it's not something I can say with any certainty, but the submitting the campaign applications before the form was officially available gave a time advantage for completing all of the requirements, and therefore gave a material bias in the election itself. Basically, submitting the form early led to them being listed first, and being listed first is something that empirically gives an advantage. And empirically meaning it has been shown in studies. There isn't like a there isn't like a scientific proof of why that is, but presumably some people are just lazy and they pick the first option. I don't know. That by empirical, it just means it has been shown to be the case that there is an advantage from being listed first. And it's quite possible that the defendants just didn't think through when that it was inappropriate to do so. I am not going to ascribe any sort of malicious motive. However, it did inappropriately bias the election. There's an open question of how they got access to the form in the first place, because the form was not published until 9 a.m. on Monday, Monday, April 19th. So it was not available to anyone except those who have the managed forms permission on the DHub group for SGA, because people who have the managed forms permission, which is an administrative permission, they have the ability to view all of the forms and all of the results that are in the DHub group. And the settings for the DHub group are set up such that basically only EOB has access, plus the advisors, plus I guess Jaslyn got access for like the newsletter, and the president has access. And it was my understanding that in the past, the vice president had access, although that appears to no longer be the case. However, the vice president does have full administrative access, so I believe it is possible that WATFA could have granted herself the permissions. I don't know. We were hoping to get evidence from campus groups, but they have not delivered the evidence yet, which I guess I'll call Courtney as a witness about that, but because Courtney is the contact with campus groups. So the question of that question of the semantics of how they got access is really more about EOB versus the fact that they did have access, they used that access, and it empirically gave them an advantage, is really the core contention with the candidates. And the question is, the alternative way to get access is someone else with access shares a link. So that's the question of how did they get access? Did WATFA somehow get access because of her administrative permissions on DHub, which is possible. Adora does not have that access, so Adora could not have gotten access that way. Or did someone else with access get a link and share a link with one or both of them or amongst themselves? So that is the question of, did someone else give them access, which is basically the EOB. I mean, so, or the advisors or Jaslyn, but there's no evidence that it's Jaslyn or the advisors, but I mean, technically could be. So in order for it to get access, either had to have administrative permission, or someone with it, or had to have administrative permission for the forms, or someone with the administrative position for the forms had to give them a link. And that's the question with EOB. I think the most likely explanation is that the DHub, the way that the permissions are set up with the DHub group simply allowed WATFA to have access, and she probably didn't think through whether or not it was ethical to use that access, and just, you know, I don't ascribe malicious intent there. And the most likely explanation is that it was a security failure, that she had access in the first place, and EOB is responsible for that security. There's no direct evidence. Again, we don't have the evidence from campus groups, so we don't know. There's no direct evidence that anyone in EOB directly enabled this. However, if there was a failure of security, it is technically negligence on the part of EOB, because EOB has the responsibility to maintain a fair election. So basically, if it was just the result of a security failure on the part of the way that the D-Hub group is set up, then EOB needs to fix that for next year, or the next election, which would be the negligence. Again, I am not ascribing malicious intent to anyone involved here. However, ultimately, the student body has a right to a fair election, to their representation, and it matters because the president actually has a formal role within the co-governance of the university, and so the vote for the presidency in particular is a vote for the students formally participating in the governance of the university. And so it's easy for us, well, it's easy for SGA and the people who hang out with SGA, like me, to lose sight of the bigger picture because it's mostly just, we all talk to each other in the meetings. But ultimately, the purpose of student government is not to be a private club that does right by its members. Ultimately, the purpose of student government is to formally represent the students within the university co-governance, and also to represent the students in general. So I personally don't believe that anyone intentionally, maliciously chose to do something unethical here, but unfortunately ethics is not entirely defined by intent, and also the harm to the student body is completely regardless of intent. I also mentioned, like, one of the candidates, one of the down ballot candidates had to run as a write-in because she didn't get her signature, she didn't get her requirements done within the required time period. And I think it's unfair that, there's a required time period, the application's open, the application's closed. Some people, well, okay, Watfa and Adora, some of their requirements were submitted outside of the required time period, and yet they were on the ballot, but someone else who was outside of the required time period was not able to be on the ballot. But again, ultimately, it's a question of the student body as a whole has a right to fair representation in university co-governance, and the unfair advantage that was conferred by the premature, or not premature, the inappropriately early applications conferred an unfair advantage that violates the right of the student body to a fair election. Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you, David. Cindy, you raised your hand earlier, quickly.
Yes, I'm sorry. The first thing is that you said empirically and referred to studies, but you didn't cite your studies. And I believe it's only fair that if you had Johnny cite his source for the dictionary, according to Robert's rules, you should also cite your studies for the clarification of everybody here in the meeting. The second thing, as professionally as I have been in SGA, the question of transparency has come up and how transparent SGA is. So for the purpose of transparency, you yourself had just mentioned how only very limited people have access to, the timestamps, stuff like that. If I know that me as currently the senator of commuter students, I don't have those privileges. You technically, as of yet, are not inaugurated. So how is it that you got the timestamps to be fully transparent to go for this allegation? I believe that we need to know this information, not only me, but people of J-Board, people of who are here listening to the meeting, people who will watch the recording. So if you could please just answer those two questions. Thank you.
The first question in regards to the study, the reason that I did not present the evidence is because the evidence is presented later in the process that Marcus outlined. This is merely opening statements, and evidence is not shared or discussed during opening statements. So I will be presenting evidence later. Second off, for the second question is, you may not know that you have access to view these permissions, but you do actually have access. And I had multiple SGA members walk me through on screen sharing and show me these permissions. And we will walk through this over screen sharing if we can later. I mean, I don't have access, but if someone with, I have screenshots, I have screenshots, but I don't directly have access. But if I don't know, if Marcus can pull us in there and show us, or someone else can, every member of SGA has access to this. And as to the question of which members showed me this, that is actually not relevant to the discussion. And I will not be answering that, and I do not need to answer that.
Okay, thank you, David. Next opening comments will be the three parties consisting of the defendants. I suppose we can have Watfa go first, and then Adora, and then Jane for EOB.
Sure, thank you. I do think who shared it is relevant, but just to give context, the only person that would have had access to that is someone in SGA. And if we think about motives of people and who I was running against, I'm just gonna put that out there. But I would like to address, I'm not sure how this put me at an advantage. Kevin and I were very prepared. My opponent didn't have someone to run with him until the day after elections even opened. So regardless, my campaign materials, they weren't submitted until after the form opened, which we do have documentation of showing the timestamps. I had known the questions on the application from long before it opened because they're the same questions every year, and I have experience in SGA. It's my third year. And Jane had mentioned the questions before. So Kevin and I met the weekend before. We typed up our responses so we'd be ready. I'm a busy person. I didn't want to be scrambling last minute to put everything together, and we wanted to be prepared. You can't call us suspicious or say this is like weird that we were prepared ahead of time just because our opponent wasn't. But we had everything ready from weeks in advance. We even had our Instagram posts ready from a while before. That's why our form was submitted right when it opened, which we'll see on the timestamps. But it has nothing to do with me clicking a link early. And like I said, I didn't submit it early. That's factually incorrect. But just to mention a couple things, if we want to talk about validity of the election, someone that was on EOB was helping my opponent with their campaign until I requested she was removed. So like, you know, those first couple days where we're putting me under a microscope, we weren't putting everyone else under a microscope. And it's also going back to that whole how you would have gotten access to those timestamps. My opponent logged into DHub 31 times on April 18th and 7 times on April 19th. So it just, you know, we could take that as we want to see who actually sent David those timestamps, but the officer access was revoked later that night. So he would have only been able to get the screenshots of me accessing the documents that morning. So to say the least, like I was under a microscope, and like Alyssa mentioned earlier, we've been under a microscope all year. But regardless, neither Adora or myself, which she will talk about later, we didn't submit our forms before they opened. So I yield.
Okay, Dora, if you'd like to make some opening statements.
Yeah, thank you, Marcus. I'll be speaking from a different tab, so just to preface. But okay, I appreciate everyone being here during the intense final weeks of the quarter and commotion of the world right now to set aside time for this J-Board trial. I ran boldly as a freshman this year, navigating through college entirely remote, a tough and unique experience, but with a desire to get involved in the Student Government Association at DePaul as Center for Community and Government Relations to create better platforms for student voices to be amplified. In fact, what is disheartening to me is that while a lot of us have worked so hard to vouch and advocate for students, policies, issues, and communities that matter at DePaul, individuals in SGA who claim to be allies for racial justice issues continue to attack and target women of color in leadership positions in SGA. This allegation about me, quote, intentionally accessing candidate material early for a special advantage is ultimately an attack on my character and invalidation of the honest work I have dedicated to the SGA organization and other communities. From the beginning of my campaign, I had previous knowledge and experience in SGA running and becoming senator, so I was already familiar with the questions and application content as it is identical year after year. I mainly attended the information sessions for a reminder on where I could access the links and information packets along with the dates and times. The elections board informed all the applicants and candidates the location of the files and applications, which would be under the Forms tab on the DHub app. As many would agree and have previously stated before, DHub is hard to navigate through and has many glitches and software issues as it is an outdated app. Essentially, this allegation is just that, a software issue and problem. According to information services, simply clicking on the link just to check if the link even works will not, even if you do not enter any information, will cite it as a timestamp saying you started the application. Again, a software issue and glitch on the app's part. Most importantly, the timestamps also show that my application was submitted after the application link was already open after 9 a.m. on April 19th, once the application was opened, and was submitted on April 19th at 4:02 p.m., which was the final edit and approved by EOB at 6:25 p.m. that day too. So really, there was no unfair advantage that took place when elections ran near 3 weeks and my raw vote percentage was 17% higher than my opponent's. The application access has no significance on the actual voting process from start to end, which determines our outcomes in these elections. I even posted close to a week after my application was approved because my friend who designs my campaign materials needed more time to finish them, so there was no timely special advantage, especially in the beginning stages of the election. With the attacks that are still continuing in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community and a lot of my family being affected by it, finals week being next week, friends and family graduating, all must be disrupted for these allegations is exact performative advocacy we seek to abolish at DePaul and especially in SGA. To commit oneself to these acts while the rest of the world and even in a smaller scope, the DePaul community, especially POC, is going through so much trauma is ridiculous. Instead, individuals suggest invalidating and questioning our work and continue to take up more space in places. This is a difficult time for many, especially me being notified about my involvement in these allegations with such extremely short notice, literal days while others knew weeks ago, disrupting preparation for final grades, and coordinating with a new cabinet to get started on good work for the communities that need our support, especially now. This is all having to be delayed for this mentally and emotionally draining, but most importantly, absolutely inconsiderate and selfish of these individuals who choose to hold these allegations. That is my opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Adora. All right, next we have, actually not Jane, it's going to be Robbie presenting opening remarks for EOB, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Let me switch tabs. Okay. Good evening, honorable judges and DePaul community that decided to show up for the hearing today. My name is Robbie Merkel. I am a member of the Election Operations Board and the current EVP of Diversity and Equity. We, the 2020-21 EOB, are here to address the allegation of, quote, negligence to notice the ability of President-elect Watfa Zayed and other candidates to access the candidate application form the night before the application opened at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. Future reference, when I refer to times, it will be in Central Standard Time, which is important given that a piece of evidence that is going to be introduced is shown in at East Coast time. The complainants will make the case that Watfa and other candidates, in this case Adora, may have had an advantage in being able to access the application early. The evidence introduced will show that Watfa was able to, quote, start the application at 12 a.m. on April 19th. Another candidate was found to have, quote, started the application before it was open, but they submitted the application well after the application was open. EOB was made aware of this before the complainant filed the allegation. Based on an internal investigation, we found that an application will say that it was, quote, started as soon as it is opened, meaning that a simple click on a link to an application will state that an application was started. That being said, we have no reason to believe that Watfa had an advantage because she submitted her application the same day at 9:46 a.m., almost an hour after the application became open to every potential candidate. Courtney James, the advisor for SGA, also removed Watfa as an officer later in the afternoon on April 19th, removing her from any special access. Watfa did not receive her petition from Jane Palos, EOB chair, as you may know, until 10:56 a.m., almost 2 hours after the candidate application form was released. Therefore, this would not have given them an advantage in the election. EOB has taken a holistic approach to our internal investigation. And even if WATFA had taken the time to look through the application, she also previously ran in SGA's elections twice and already knows all of the information and questions asked in the candidate application form. Again, she did not submit the application until 9:46 a.m. Central Standard Time, after it was open to the public, and evidence introduced today will prove that. We, again, the 2020-2021 Election Operations Board, urge the Judicial Board to dismiss this allegation, given that no harm was committed against a member of the student body. Those that will argue against this dismissal will only have arguments that are factually inaccurate and contorted. The complainant and conspirators are not seeking accountability. They are seeking punishment. No one should be punished for being human and making a simple human mistake. The allegations rooted in malice and defamation will not divide or weaken SGA. In fact, it will make us stronger and more unified than ever before as the organization continues to serve the greater DePaul community under a new administration. We are committed to leading with love. And as Mariam Kaba, a well-known practitioner of transformative justice and abolition, once said, "To lead with love gives us a fighting chance at winning. Love will always win." Thank you.
All right, thank you, Robbie. With that, we will move on to witnesses, evidence, and test. Just double checking myself, making sure that's accurate. Okay. All right, David, you have the floor for your witnesses, evidence, and testimony.
Okay, let's see. To start, I'm going to send a link in the chat here.
As a reminder, you do have co-host privileges, so
Oh, okay, I can do that
possible
too. Yeah, let me do that. That's easier. Well, yeah. I also sent the link if people want to follow along at home. So this is an academic article on ballot order effects, and it's long, but the article talks about the pattern that first listed candidates have an advantage, and let's see. NYC random ballot order. I have heard that the New York City ballot has been randomized. I didn't pull up an evidence on this, but yes, sorry, I don't have this in front of me. Yeah, let me get back to that. But yeah, there is an advantage to being listed first. And it is my understanding that some jurisdictions have started randomizing ballot order, but I don't have a citation for that in front of me. Let's see. My sister lives in New York City and she was telling me about it, so I was gonna see if I get a link on that. The policy that listed first. Can I call Jane? Okay. So it is
I
my
thought we were presenting evidence right now.
and witnesses or evidence and witnesses at the same time. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Okay, it's really basic. I would just,
Yeah.
can you confirm that it is in fact the policy of EOB that the person who completes all of their requirements for their candidacy gets listed first in the ballot, and then the second person to complete their requirements get listed second, and so on. It's my understanding it's not part of the bylaws, but it is the policy.
There's no policy. There's no policy.
How is the ballot order determined?
It's not up to the elections board. It's actually up to information services. So I send all of the information to information services. They take care of it. I cannot take care of the ballot. That is not my responsibility. It's not the EOB. It completely goes to information services, and it is out of our control at that point.
1 second. I had heard otherwise. So that's interesting.
Okay, so otherwise is not, I am correct, and otherwise is not. So you can contact IS if you have more questions about that.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
I actually have a question. I just want to clarify something. So EOB does not determine that order, IS does, but do we know that the first person to have finished all of their things is in fact the one that gets listed first?
That's not necessarily correct. I have sent to information services all of the candidates, and they have been in a different order. So it is, and even the order of the not the candidates, but the positions is not even in the order that I send them either. So it's out of my control. Even if I send them in a different order, they will not appear the same on the ballot. It's not guaranteed.
It had come up in conversations between me and other SGA members that it was understood that it was the ballot order. I don't have a citation for that at the moment. I will see what I can track down. Apparently it had come up in previous elections. Anyway, so my evidence is under the assumption that that is the case because that is what I had been told. And again, I'm an outsider. The order in which the complaints are listed doesn't really indicate what the how the complaints came together. The issue with the formatting, that's the other complaint, which is not very well summarized. Anyway, I noticed a weird anomaly with the formatting, and so I asked around about it, and that's when someone told me that WATFA had submitted her application early, let's see. So I have, hold on.
David, do you mind if I let Misa ask a question?
Yeah, sure. I was just going to pull up the screenshots that showed that what the evidence that I had. Sure. I mean, if you want, I'm pulling up, pulling this up, so I might not be able. I'm doing two things at once. But if he wants to talk about it at the same time, that's cool.
We'll work with you. Yeah, go ahead, Misa.
Thank you. David, I appreciate you like showing all this evidence. I do have a couple of questions. There has been a lot of through your conversation, you have mentioned that in conversation with other SGA members, and in order for us to understand and make a decision, we need to understand who these SGA members are, seeing that in this past election, a lot of SGA members were running for election. And so we need to see if there's a conflict of interest with the person who is a defendant or the person who is the plaintiff. So I asked, in order for me to make a full, accurate, perfect decision, ensuring that we are being fair to both parties, I need to know who is this SGA member who provided you with the information, seeing that you are not an SGA representative.
As I mentioned, it was the formatting anomaly with the text, which is the other thing that actually got the conversation started. And that's something that I noticed myself as a candidate. The evidence about the forms being submitted early is accessible to any SGA member, and the question of whether or not that confers an inappropriate advantage is not dependent on which people I have asked to verify information, because it's evidence that exists. This is not about them. This is a complaint about the candidates submitting early, and how I know that they submitted early does not change whether or not they submitted early, and does not change the reason why I thought it was unethical. It is materially irrelevant.
I am going to repeat the question. As a member of J-Board, in order for me to make an accurate decision, I need to know who was the person who provided you with that information. Seeing that the defendant is being accused and that a member who ran against the defendant also ran for election in this 2021 spring election. So I need to know if you were provided with information from the person who ran against Wafa Syed, or if you were given information by a candidate that ran against Adora. I just want to know who were the SGA members who you've been talking to who provided you with the information on the timesheets and on how you were able to gain any of this information.
Misa, I appreciate the question. I think I got to overrule you on that. I don't think this should be something that we consider as relevant. I think the information, whether or not what he says is true, should be the only thing. And I think the evidence that we're going to see will give us an answer to that.
Thank you, Marcus.
I'm sorry. Alec, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if we've already seen or heard the evidence that rebukes that. How come what Misa said isn't relevant information for the general point of order for the rest of us as not only members of the SGA, but the general public who deserve full transparency, as we love to throw around here. If we really want full transparency, why can't we know who the SGA member was who gave you that information?
I will try to answer that, and just say that again, it's just whether or not what David claims is true is the only thing that this hearing cares about. Outside of the hearing, you can have any conversations you want, and if we want to try to just figure that out at GB or something, but as far as this hearing, this specific allegation, I do not think that's relevant, and I would not allow that to take a central part of the trial. Okay, so this is questions and this is evidence and witnesses. I do see one hand.
I was in the middle. I mean, sure, we can go. One more question, I guess. I was in the middle of presenting, but I guess we can answer the one question.
Thank you, David. Go ahead, AJ. Please make it quick.
Hi, sorry. I'm no longer a member of SGA, but I used to be. This is just forgive my kind of wanting to butt in here, but I just had a procedural question, which is, I agree with the Marcus, I think you're the Chief Justice, or the presiding officer, let's say, who speaks to the truth of the allegation being the most important thing, not who brought it forward. That's actually a matter of law, like in the real legal system. But I just wanted to ask, since that is on the table, is there any way to tell whether the methods that were brought forward around information services, how information was, the formatting of the information that was sent at the time, those matters of fact are in any way possible to prove during these proceedings?
I'm not aware of anything like that. Yeah, I can't answer that. Some of the information requested from IS hasn't come in yet.
Got it.
Just kind of to answer that question, I requested, after I made the complaint, I requested from Courtney that she communicate with Campus Groups, which is the outside cloud services vendor that offers this, that powers D-Hub. And because I'm a nerd, I have been attending Campus Groups trainings about how to use Campus Groups. And when I was at one of these trainings, at the time that I found out that one of the applications had been submitted early before I learned about the second one, I asked someone at the Campus Groups training who was just an employee of Campus Groups about what kind of logging was available, and they gave me a sense of what was available to DePaul IS directly and what would have to be gotten from Campus Groups, and they gave me instructions on what to ask Courtney. So Courtney passed that along to IS/Campus Groups, and Courtney told me that we are still waiting for information from Campus Groups. I only have like what shows up in, when an SGA member looks at this through Campus Groups. I am open to the fact that, or not that, I am open to the possibility that that this information, or that the interface that is shown may not be accurate. It may not be accurate, and it might make it look like something happened when there may have not been wrongdoing. I'm open to that. But the evidence that is available to SGM members who go into Campus Groups and look at the timestamps says one thing. So I was actually about to call in Courtney if she could say something about what's going on with that.
Feel free. Courtney, what do you have?
Great. Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, so speaking to that point, David, so David did ask me to get logs. The data from allegation 2 and allegation 3, I do have timestamp access to allegation 2, and exactly, David, what you just talked about, you just didn't have a full, whoever took the picture of it didn't have a full view of it. So if it's okay, I'm gonna take a minute and show everyone. I do have the timestamps for this one.
And when I asked the Campus Groups people, like they said, that the information that's available in the interface is very, is limited. And then the information that like DePaul IS can access is somewhat more than that. But as you're kind of indicating with allegation 3, which we have not gotten to, that was the one that they said that that Campus Groups engineers would have to dig up because it's not commonly accessed. But yeah, could you share that? I mean, the thing that I have is literally what anyone goes, they'll see that, but it might. What do you have?
This is the worst possible time, but my computer just froze. Can you all still see me moving? I can like hear you, but I can't. My Zoom.
Your camera's working.
Your camera's great. We see you.
Okay, if I can't click on my computer. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're back. Okay, so can you see Campus Groups right now? Great. Okay, so this is the D-Hub homepage. So what David was talking about earlier. So if you go into the DePaul SGA portal, one of the things I'll note, there's a couple questions about who had access to what when. So, in all transparency, all officers, all senators, and all current cabinet members had access until I went back and looked at my text message logs. They all had access to forms until like 8:30 on April 19th. It was an oversight. Jane and I didn't have the conversation of like, should we turn off access? So that day I texted her and said, hey, should I remove access for everyone? So she said yes. She and I both so I removed it as soon as we had that conversation. I'd also add for the future, one thing I've already had some conversations with IS. We're planning to make a separate election portal so that we never have this issue again in the future. So like speaking, I think to some of these points, like I'm hoping that the evidence I show you, like David, if it is sufficient, we can you know,
I assume
perhaps-
I was going
Right.
to ask. I'm going to go through
Yep.
this. This is
Yeah.
it's
So
potentially
I'll show you this, and
I have.
then knowing
Yeah.
that we're going to fix the error in the future. The other thing I'd note, everything I'm going to show you is not Courtney James's opinion of how DHub works. I had a meeting with IS and said, can you show me this? And we ran tests of things. So this is not, you know, like what I think or how I think it works. They actually validated it for me. So what whoever took the screenshots did to see that, so they went to the current members listing, and you can search for a member. And when you're an officer, you can see all of these different components. And if you go to survey and forms, you can see literally every survey and form that someone submitted. And
that's that is.
This is what David was going to show. So it says submitted on April 19th at 1 a.m. Again, I just have you remember that time for the time being. Then if you look at Adora, and you click on Adora and Adora's forms, her surveys and forms, says that she submitted it on April 18th, which is the day before April 19th at 4:32 p.m. So again, like David mentioned, it is only a partial view of what actually happened. So if you go into the form itself, that's when you get a better look at all of the timestamps. So if you go into the election candidate application, you can see, once it decides it wants to load, if you look at individual users, WATFA, it says WATFA started on April 19th at 12 a.m. So if you remember from what I said a minute ago, it said 1 a.m. That was Eastern time. This shows time by users. So I'm located in the Central Time Zone. So this is showing that there was a logged click at April 19th at 12 a.m. The form was not submitted until April 19th at 9:46 a.m. And then you'll see another date here that says updated on April 19th at 10:55. You'll notice that it was approved by Jane on April 19th at 10:55. So that is the updated and the approved are the same time. So then if you go and look at Adora, so you'll see that Adora started the form on April 18th at 3:32 p.m. Again, if you remember, the other form, the public view said 4:32, so Eastern time versus Central time. But Adora submitted the form on April 19th at 4:02 p.m. And it was updated on April 19th at 6:25, which again matches what Kelsey did April 19th at 6:25 p.m. So if you'd like, I can show you the contents of the form. I would prefer not to show one that a candidate fully filled out because it includes information on their birthday. But speaking, I think, to what WATFA said about the knowing the information, it's either what we call directory information. So it's like your name, ID number, email, and then it includes a couple of generic questions. So like I mentioned, that started the test that we ran. We had a student who was not running for SGA. We tested it for another student, and we didn't put in any information in the form. We didn't put anything in it, and it logged it as started. So that is you don't have to enter even your name, a text, that will trigger starting the form. So okay. I know both sides were going to ask me to serve as a witness with evidence. Are there any things that I'm missing?
Could you pull up the permissions that shows the access to the forms administration? You were saying that changed. Can you explain that a little more? Because I've only seen the way that it is now. I don't know the history of that, and that's something that is, as far as I know, not available in public logging. If those changed, you were saying something about the permissions changing.
Yeah, so let me go to this. So if you go back to the SGA dashboard, so and you click into, you'll only have this if it appears as an officer's. Then if you go into permissions, what you'll see is you can see who can do what. So you'll notice a number of these people were unchecked. That was what I went in and did on the 19th. WATFA currently has this ability. I believe Alyssa, like because of the transition, and because we need to re-register SGA, because you all don't know this, but SGA's portal was actually disabled. Jane can speak to it, but SGA's portal was disabled and we weren't able to do anything in DHub because the re-registration process is May 1st. So, and that because that was in the middle of it, we had to like go in and do like a special permission to override it. Yeah, so we went in and disabled all, I went in and disabled all of these things. So you can go in and check boxes based to determine who has access to what.
I was wondering if you could show any logs that demonstrate this, because I had been told by other SGA members that they did not have administrative access to the forms at that time. Can you, do you have logs from campus groups on that?
I don't have the logs. I can tell you I took off everyone's access on 8:30 on April 19th. So again, that's like what we're waiting for from campus groups. So I think to get this out of the way for the next one, we put in a request for campus groups for data and logs, and they haven't gotten it to us. I mean, we followed up a couple times and we just haven't gotten it.
Honestly, I would really like to be able to see the hard logs from campus groups about exactly what happened where, when.
But can I ask why? Because if the form
information.
Well, if I can say why I'm asking why, because we've now seen that the numbers that she didn't change it. So for the case that we're talking about right now, we've seen the numbers, right? So, or we've seen the timestamps. So I think like the case you're talking about next is a different story. And I think that you perhaps have a chance to make an argument for, but we have relevant time logs for this case. So, yeah.
I think that accessing the form is still, accessing the form early is still arguably unethical. As a non-SGA member, I had no idea what was going to be on the questionnaire. Of course, the question of there being an electoral advantage, procedural advantage to members versus non-members is a completely separate question. But the question of whether the early access was ethical or non-ethical is an open question. My complaint was based on the information that is shown that you pulled up, that you said that other SGA members can see. So you shared more information there. Sorry, I haven't. I've not had time.
Oh, you're fine. Well, I think to answer your question, David, no, I don't have the logs. So while I have the floor and while I'm showing evidence, is there anything else that you'd like to see or that WATFA would like to see just to keep this kind of moving along?
There's not that you have, I think. I think we're waiting on campus groups. I really would like to get like the campus groups picture of what happened when exactly, to the extent that they can, just because we've got there the different stuff is showing different things. Honestly, the information you're showing does change the picture quite a bit. I will admit. It changes it quite a bit because having it say submitted on says one thing, and yeah.
Okay.
Give me a second. I need to remember if there's anything else I was gonna.
Oh, it looks like Jane has a question while you're remembering.
Yeah, my brain's a little fuzzy of new information coming in, and so I mentioned already that I'm disabled, and so processing the information is kind of like knocking off my game a little bit. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not ascribing malicious intent to people. However, and you were saying about that they're going to put the election separate, or were you saying or someone else saying? And that was actually what I was going to suggest is like EOB needs to have like its own thing because it seems like the security wasn't great regardless. And it sounds like the situation may not have been as bad as it looked based on the information, which again seems to be literally the campus group's interface just saying things wrong.
Yeah, David, can I ask you a question? And you, I mean, you can take a minute to process this. So seeing the information you've seen, do you want us to continue with this allegation or can we move on to the next one? Do you want us to still continue?
It changes the complaint, and I don't want to dismiss the complaint, or I don't want to withdraw the complaint because there is the question of whether the early access itself was ethical or unethical, and I would like to get J-Board's opinion on that. It certainly makes me feel less strongly about the complaint, but I would like J-Board to decide that, and I also would like J-Board to decide that the security was negligent on the elections, even if they do not, even if they don't determine everything in the complaint that I originally complained. I would like to get their, their ruling on it. But yeah, this does change, the information does change the picture quite a bit. Did I mention, and I'll mention this through the recording, I think that the campus groups interface kind of sucks. So anyway.
We're working on it. Yeah.
Jane.
So I know Wafa, did you have any questions about this? Or I guess Jane, like as well, or Adora, sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
been sitting at this desk for a long time.
Jane
I know,
had a-
I mean, about the evidence I presented, just so like I don't get recalled back.
Yeah, Jane had her,
Right, yep, I'm asking, Jane, do you have any questions or anything else you need me to present? Wafa?
No, I just, if I can make a point, I think Adora should be able to present her witnesses and her evidence because we're short on time and I know she prepared and she has someone that has a time constraint. So if we could just move on, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you, Watfa. Yeah, that was the next move. Yes, so Adora, if you would like to present your evidence witnesses.
I didn't formally end, but I don't think I have anything else. So
noted. Okay.
And
we hear your concerns regarding the.
I think that Courtney covered it. Yeah, I think I'm sorry, my brain's just a little fuzzy, so I didn't stop to think about whether or not I really gone through everything, but I think I've gone through everything.
Okay. All right. Thank you, David. Adora, floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I will try and make this as quick as possible, guys. Would I be able to have screen sharing abilities, please?
Should be good.
I got it now. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Yes, okay.
Yeah.
So just to briefly go over what I mentioned in my opening statement, this here is just to remind everyone, this was my raw vote percentage in the election, 17%. That's to address the timely and empirical, quote unquote, empirical advantage I had. Also, to go along with me preparing in the beginning stages of the election. As you can see here, this is my first post on my campaign account, and this was on April 25th. My witness, I can start out with Annie. She can attest to this. Actually, question, Marcus, do I need to present all my evidence before my witnesses?
Do it however you see fit.
Okay, great. Just for relevance and no one gets confused. I'm gonna direct it to Annie now. Can I stop sharing my screen and just keep going back and forth? That's fine.
Yep, it's all yours.
Okay, great. Okay, so Annie. I just have a couple questions for you. That's fine.
Okay, sounds good. Hi everyone, I'm Annie.
So Annie designs all my campaign materials. Okay, Annie, when did we start planning and preparing our campaign materials?
You first texted me on April 19th around noon. and I have receipts of that.
Okay, I can also show that as well at the end once you're done speaking, but what issues did we have with posting materials until a week after my application was submitted?
I am currently a member of the Alpha Zeta Delta sorority, and I run the entire Instagram as a freshman. And I was in the middle of creating a bunch of content for that. And so I needed a little bit of time to finish up that work in order to take on your campaign designs.
Okay. How has your personal experience been navigating through D-Hub?
I absolutely hate it. But that's also because I've never had any sort of one-on-one instructions because I literally don't, like, I'm a freshman, I've started college from home, I've never stepped foot in a DePaul classroom besides when I toured the school. So like the most instructions I've got for D-Hub has been through my big and my sorority and then other upperclassmen that I've met.
Okay, and my last and final question is, what can you share in terms of our experiences together running campaigns and my previous experience in SGA, as well as my character in student advocacy?
You have been a great friend to me in general, and you've also been so much fun to work with. I've loved creating all your designs, and I agree with everything you have made a big initiatives you ran on, and you have been a great person to design for, and you've been just awesome.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Annie. So in terms of my other evidence that I had prepared, Courtney already went over those timestamps. So my next witness that I wanted to question was Cindy. I'm gonna start.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so Cindy, can you talk about your own experiences with harassment in SGA as a woman of color?
I would like to specify that I'm going to speak from this as from a professional point of view. I do not want to mix this with any interpersonal things. And I think a big part of it is identifying that I am not a woman of color because I'm very white passing. I don't identify with that, but I am a not white woman. And I think that plays a very big role because I have had my mental health used against me personally by a white man. This has happened continuously throughout the quarter, to the extent that I have had to go for emotional support through like health and wellness and different programs. And I have also just experienced being interrupted, having mental health mansplained to me. And these are just things that I have had to deal with in a professional setting.
Okay, and my next question is, have you witnessed harassment of other women of color in SGA?
Absolutely. I've first-handedly seen other women of color and women in general being spoken over, being dismissed, having their ideas dismissed. I have seen bombardment of texts, emails, calls, harassing behavior like that. I have had to be the person who consoles other women of color because we get continuously torn down. I have seen women of color get called out continuously for doing their job. We are held to a higher standard as women in general, having our work continuously nitpicked at. And especially this is noticed in women of color. And this is all a pattern that I have noticed in my time in SGA.
Okay, and my last question for you is, do you think that these allegations affect my leadership skills at all?
I don't, and I think I really did want to speak on this very quickly. I know we're really crushed on time, but the reason that me personally, I wanted to know how the accuser has got that information, because it's been made clear that the people who can see the timestamps are who can see the submissions are officers. And the reason I wanted to know this is because the people who are officers and who are working in SGA, they have a very high morality, in the sense that they make good judgment calls. These are good people. So My question is, if someone who had those access privileges saw and noticed these timestamps, then, and they decided this is not worthy for me to accuse either you professionally or WATFA, then having those good judgment calls, knowing that we have the responsibility to make everything fair for the student body, for student government itself, and they did not see enough of a discrepancy, enough of an impact, no harm in saying this is enough to not formally make a complaint against that, then I don't see why this has to come to this level when we have people who don't think that it is, that there's no harm. When it comes to you, I have seen you hold open forum. I have seen you write notes directly about student complaints, work with the students directly, which has all earned you your title of EVP elect. So I don't think that this has any impact on your leadership, and you continuously stand up for marginalized groups. And I think that we have to, as women of color, we have to always be the professional ones in every setting. If we try to speak out against things, we get harassed as being overly emotional. And I think this narrative of going against 2 women of color for clicking a link and having that be the entire evidence perpetrates the same thing, that we have to tolerate that, because if we fight against it, we're unprofessional. This is literally supporting the narrative of harassing women of color, which has been a pattern that has continued in SGA the entire time I have been here. And I am very sick of just standing there and watching it happen and not speaking out against this. This is a ridiculous complaint, and this has gone on for far too long. I don't think it has any impact on your leadership, and anyone who has worked with you would know that. Anyone who has worked with WASPA also would know that. So that is what I have to say.
Okay, thank you so much, Cindy. My next witness is Carolina Aceves. If I could just start asking you questions, Caro. Okay, so my first question for you is, can you talk about your own experiences with harassment in SGA as a woman of color?
I want to first ask if you can hear me, because my computer is overheating, and so okay, great, amazing, love that. So my own experiences, well, this is my first year in SGA, and it's all obviously been online, and so all I can speak on is those experiences of everything being on the screen. Nevertheless, I have to say that it has been difficult navigating student government this past year. David and I have spoken privately, and I'm not going to release those messages because that's unfair to both of us. I hope those conversations can be kept privately because we are both very vulnerable in that space. But I have already spoken out about how the environment in SGA has felt very tense. I feel that as SGA members and even just students at large, we have a number of privileges, and we've been weaponizing them against each other rather than targeting the administration, who is ultimately to blame for a lot of these problems. The reason why campus group is so inaccessible is, again, because administration probably designed it to be that way. And so I think it's important that we address who the so-called enemy is in this situation. And I think going about it this way was wrong. I don't think individual students should be blamed for campus group being a mess. I think it's DePaul University. And that's just one of many reasons why DePaul University should be called out. And right now it's a shame because I have faculty members reaching out, asking that student government ally itself with their initiatives in response to DePaul raising the tuition by astronomical levels, despite the fact that we are in a pandemic and most of us cannot afford that right now. And so I have to tell these faculty members that we cannot do anything because of this trial, that we are not available. Nobody's available to help this initiative because we're in this trial, and administration is winning because of that. And so I think it's important we recognize the way that these privileges are being targeted against the most underrepresented groups within SGA. I'm upset because in years past, SGA has been deserving of critique. I'm not gonna lie. Past SGAs have done harmful things, have attacked other students, but it's only now that SGA is being held to these standards that now we're critiquing SGA as if, I just find it ironic that now that SGA seems to be predominantly POC, that's when critiques are coming up. It's really unfortunate because now it feels like SGA is an embarrassment.
Okay, thank you so much, Caro. Just to move on to my last witness, who for the sake of time, I just wanted to talk to Alec, ask him one more question. Alec, how can you attest to your experiences with my character and us also running together and winning senatorship last term?
Yeah, it was not easy. As you touched on earlier, it was really not easy. We were both running in really competitive races, and we both were attacked for our character, for who we were and the positions that we took. This time around, you ran against Magoli. Magoli is not only a close friend of mine, she's one of my best friends. And I had been talking with her about running for a really long time, and I helped her with her campaign the entire time. That being said, both me and her believe that you won fair and square. You ran a hard race. I saw it last fall when you ran in a really competitive race, that it was not easy. And it's not easy now, and it probably won't be easy in the future, but you ran a really good race, a really hard race. And you didn't cheat, you didn't lie, you didn't steal, you didn't do anything. You put the information that you wanted out there and you won on it. And you beat my friend, you beat someone who I endorsed, you beat someone who I wanted to beat you. And I have a lot of respect for that. And I have nothing but good things to say about you, because we are both Asian Americans. We were both freshmen. We were both never been to campus. And I have nothing but good things to say about you. And I want to apologize on behalf of me, on behalf of Magoli, that you have to go through this because it's not fair. And she knows that, being a woman of color as well. And she would never wish anything upon that, even against someone that she wanted to beat. So that's all that I have to say on that.
Thank you so much for your kind words, everyone. That's all for my evidence and witnesses, Marcus.
Okay, thank you, Adora. All right, so next we have EOB. Oh wait, sorry, did EOB already present? This is a long one. Somebody remind me.
Yes, for this allegation, EOB already presented their, yes, we're fine.
Okay, all right, so just Watfa left in, I think, right?
Yeah, it's just me. I really have witnesses. Oh, go ahead.
Is everybody directly involved with the case okay that we are going past 9 in the interest of finishing tonight?
I have to leave at 9:30. That's the latest I could stay. So if we could just be a little bit more conscious of our responses and timing, that'd be really great.
Okay, I will do what I can. I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, go ahead, Watfa.
Thank you. I just had one witness, Alec, and then just a couple closing remarks, but we're not on closing remarks yet. So Alec, if you can also be my witness like you were for Adora. I just have a couple questions, very similar to the ones you were just asked, but what was your experience like working with me this past year?
Again, nothing but good things to say. Like I was talking about earlier, I'm a freshman. I ran not knowing anything about DePaul, nothing about campus, how it works, what D-Hub was. I had no clue who was on SGA. I even had people reach out to me who were in SGA, and I didn't know that they were at SGA. That's how little I knew about it. And yet during the race, like I talked about, I was continuously attacked. And it wasn't just by people who were voting for me. It was by people in this very SGA general body. And it was people who were working with candidates who were running against me, and they were spreading misinformation and lies and trying to take me down publicly and privately. And what that led to was a really bad impression of what SGA was. I seriously considered not even joining. I didn't want to join. I thought, if this is what SGA is, I don't want to be a part of it. I did SGA in high school, my freshman year, and it was exactly what I experienced during my race. And I said, that's really shitty. So I'm probably not going to do it until I had you and Alyssa and a couple other people reach out to me and tell me not only congratulations on my win, but that they were really excited to work with me. So I said, you know what, I'm going to stay, because even if 80% of these people in here don't think that I deserve this position, or don't think that what I ran on are good policies, or don't like me as a person, at least I have these people. And that has remained true through the very end, through now, through this race. And, you know, it was just, it's really unfortunate to see this happening, because I literally have not, and I know this kind of ties into what else, everything here, but that we're talking about. But again, this is not something that we needed to do, and I have nothing else to say on that question.
Thank you, Alec. And just to echo what everyone's saying in the chat, I appreciate that you stayed. I'm like really grateful to call you one of my close friends now. So thank you for staying. Just a couple other questions. Do you think what is happening right now compromises my ability to be an effective leader? And
Absolutely.
another follow-up is, do you think accessing materials is the reason I won the election?
First, no. I do not think that this has compromised your position. I think if anything, this shows that you are really tough against against situations that you're swimming heavily upstream in. Like Otto talked about earlier, we should be fighting the administration right now. And we should be holding their feet to the fire. I have seen you do that more than a couple of times. And I think now I have even more confidence that going into next year, you are going to be an amazing president who is going to lead me, Adora, the rest of the general body that are going to accompany you and follow your lead, and Kevin's lead as vice president. I have nothing but more confidence after this that you are tough against adversity, and that you will represent our best interests and marginalized groups on campus in the best way that you possibly can. And then your last question, if you accessing materials early gave you a leg up, I think we saw from the evidence, you won more than 100 votes. You and Kevin won more than 100 votes. And like I have said, earlier about your character and about your ability to lead and your integrity, that is not lost on voters, that is not lost on other members of SGA, and that is not lost on faculty and council. Faculty and staff and everyone. I have heard from people who have never met you, but who know me and saw that I endorsed you, who said, I don't know, but I voted for Watfa. Is that her name? I think that's her name. I don't know. She just seems so awesome and like really tough. And, you know, that has been the thing. That has been the thoughts and the conversations that that I have heard, and that I know that you have heard as well. I know that you ran a really hard race. I think if anything is clear, you have been an outspoken voice to something that I'm really passionate about, which is ending the tuition discount for FOP officers. We saw from the referendum that 83% of SGA students support that. And so I think that there is nothing that you did wrong, or that D-Hub did wrong, that gave you a leg up. I think the only leg up that we're talking about is that you're a kick-ass woman of color who knew how to run a race and knew how to win a race. And I think that's really what we should be talking about here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the kind words. Yeah, I don't have any other questions for Alec, but thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I believe everyone has presented evidence, and we've had a lot of crosstalk. So I think that should count as what's the word? Cross-examination, sorry. And we've had some, I think, pretty compelling evidence, as all sides have acknowledged. Is everybody okay that we move on to the final allegation?
I wanted to make some brief closing remarks.
Sure, okay, go for it.
I wanted to go back and reiterate that I am not attempting to question the character of the people involved. I Adora actually reached out during the election, made time to meet with me about disabled student issues. The reason that I made the complaint is really just escalation of frustration with SGA in general over this past year. I have been an outsider. I'm still an outsider, technically. And Kato mentioned in the chat, the administration thinks we're a joke. And I mean, the sentiments come up in the past. However, the flip side of that is I've talked to other students. I've been conducting, working with a committee and conducting engagement research, or constituent research, and a lot of other students feel like feels like the student government is kind of disconnected from the student body. There is a perception that student government has a huge amount of power, and I've had repeated frustration coming into SGA and trying to bring things up, not necessarily knowing how to bring things up, and getting dismissed in various different ways, and getting deflection. And I mean, that's like, why did I bring all the complaints? Is because I tried to bring things up and always deflection. And this is, you know, I keep trying, I keep pushing, I keep trying. Most other students, if that happened to them once, they'll just leave and never come back to SGA. And yeah, I wish it hadn't come to filing complaints. And also, I would be wonderfully glad to be wrong and have this be campus groups just literally saying the wrong thing in their interface, like one part of the interface saying that looking at the form is a submission when the other side of the interface says that it wasn't a submission. I would be wonderfully happy to be wrong. And this is really, I brought these complaints because I've just been, I have not found any other effective way to get things addressed. And I, you know, given the information that was available to me, that again, may have been wrong, I was really upset about that, because as also I mentioned that I've kind of seen people hide behind rules and say the rules are for, well, not say, but I give the impression from SGA in many ways, the rules are for thee, not for me. And it seemed like another example of that. And I'm interested to see the campus groups data logs, because on the one hand, Courtney is saying that this access was revoked afterwards, but on the other hand, I had another SJ officer tell me that they had not had, that it had been cut off earlier. And so presumably someone is mistaken, and it might be the SJ, it might be DHub's fault. But there's some confusion about that, and I would like to have the, you know, the campus group's data consulted before the decision is made. But again, I would be very happy to be wrong. The question of whether or not it is ethical to access the form early, not submit it, but access it, is a legitimate question, but it is obviously does not remotely have the same gravity of actually submitting the form. There is the question that SGA members have an electoral advantage that I think is a problem, but it is not the same kind of problem as submitting a form early. And is a question that is to be addressed separately. I would like to work to level the playing field in future elections so that more people are encouraged to join. But I appreciate all the comments. I know that I will never fully understand what it is like to be harassed as a woman, or to be harassed as a person of color. I've heard a lot of things, and sometimes I can lose a little, I know I can lose a little bit of perspective on that. my motivation for bringing these complaints was entirely related to the power position that SGA, and particularly the leadership of SGA, have compared to the rest of the student body, and my repeated frustrations with that. And WATFA in particular is in a very privileged power position within the formal, governance hierarchy of student governance hierarchy of the university. Not to the extent that Alyssa is, because Alyssa like literally gets to vote on committees and stuff, but there is a huge power difference here, and I brought my complaints because of my frustrations of feeling of repeatedly banging my head against a wall with the power hierarchy of SGA and not being heard. And yeah, so I'm kind of circling around a lot, but I wanted to revisit that. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you, David. Your comments are noted. Jane, ending comments from EOB.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick point of order. Robbie's going to do the closing argument or the closing statement from EOB. I just wanted to make a brief point of order. Closing statement needs to be brief. It needs to be very quick. Sum up your points, not go in circles, not go on tangents, not bring up new points. I want everybody to be cognizant of everyone's time. It is 9:15. 20 minutes ago, we said that we were going to be moving on to allegation 2 very quickly. It is now 9:15. WATFA has to go at 9:30. We need to be cognizant of people's time. And Robbie, you can go ahead and do our closing statement.
Yes, thank you. And I have my closing statement prepared. Okay, so the complainant and his conspirators have tried to make the case that WATFA and Adora may have had an advantage in being able to access the application early. Based on EOB's internal investigation and evidence even tonight, we have no reason to believe that WATFA and Adora had an advantage because they submitted their applications after the application was open on April 19th. We once again urge the Judicial Board to dismiss the allegation. We are disappointed that we, as EOB, had to defend our reputation as a board that has always committed to ensuring a free and fair election, which actually happened. The unpreparedness of the complainant has drawn out the proceedings and, quite frankly, wasted our time. But we thank the student body for their patience and understanding. Personally, as someone who has been recognized for my commitment to democratic principles by the Department of Political Science, I find the complainant and his conspirators' attempt to punish women of color and try to defame their historic elections quite despicable. And I think you and others involved in this complaint owe WATFA, Adora, and EOB an apology. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Robbie. I suppose, Adora, would you like to make a closing remark?
Just briefly. I just urge everyone to think deeply and truthfully about their individual purposes and intentions for being in SGA and showing up as an ally. None of us need performative advocacy, people running and holding positions for an addition to their resume, power-hungry people, or time, energy, and resources wasted on trials over petty allegations and cruel assumptions of character. There need not be any more party politics or false and harmful narratives created to attack those who have fairly earned positions and prove their genuine devotion to student advocacy. With the history and events I've had to witness this past year of people of color, especially women, being attacked by their white counterparts in an organization that long lacked representation from marginalized communities and minorities is absolutely off-putting. The racial injustice and retaliation behind these allegations truly do not surprise me, since advocacy and public service have been historically oppressed by performative allies. There were and are no special advantages given out, as I have performed nothing but a fair and honest campaign this past election season. I'm going to keep combating the injustice women of color face in politics and law, as instances like these show representation is needed more than ever, as we are still fighting systems of oppression at their core here at DePaul. Thank you for all your time tonight and respectfully listening. I sincerely appreciate it. That's all for me, Marcus.
Thank you, Adora. Okay, with that, we will move on to the final allegation, and that is conspiracy between WATFA and the EOB to provide better text formatting of their, I suppose WATFA and Kevin take it cumulatively, to provide text formatting that's better of their candidacy initiatives over other candidates. Do we have any comments or questions about the allegations first? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands. So with that, I will move on. Oh, wrong tab. Okay, opening statements. Once again, David, would you like to make an opening statement here? And please be aware of the time.
Yeah, first off, that is not how I would have summarized the complaint. There was, when WATFA's and Kevin's campaign materials were posted, their initiatives were formatted using HTML bullets. And then when mine was posted, mine was like posted without proper bullet formatting and really hard to read, and everyone else's was also posted really hard to read with no bullet points. And I freaked out about this because I wanted my initiatives to be able to be easily understood. And so I emailed Jane about it, and took her a couple days to figure it out, to fix it, but she did fix it. And turns out that I'm revealing private communication here, but it turns out that Jane also hates DHub. So at least with the bullet point formatting, I can't speak to how she feels about DHub otherwise, but this is really an accessory to the prior complaint, where it was weird that the first campaign materials that were posted in a way that the people whoever posted the subsequent ones were not able to format that. And also the bullet point formatting was not something that was available in the application form. It was something that would have had been added. It may very well have been that just it was a different person from EOB who posted that, and that person just, I don't know, knew how to do formatting better or something like that. I don't know. It was just something that was like, I hadn't really thought anything of it until the learning about the other stuff from the previous complaint, which again may have been DHub inaccurate, literally the interface lying, which appears to have been the case. That made me be like, maybe there was something hinky going on there. And again, it's something that I have no access to look at. There is not, as I understand, because as I mentioned, I attended campus groups training. So I asked someone at campus group training if there was like, edit history or something, so we could see what happened to make sure that nothing had happened. And they said that information was not available on the DePaul side, and that was something that they had to dig up. So this is something where there may very well be a perfectly innocent explanation, but in light of the previous complaint, I just wanted to make sure that nothing hinky had happened. And as I understand it, we're still waiting for the evidence from campus groups. So yeah. So I don't have any evidence to share beyond that. I mean, I could share the emails with Jane, but I don't think that that's a point of contention. So really, it's just, yeah, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, David. WATFA and EOB, would you like to make opening remarks as well?
Yes, I'm gonna have, Ari is actually gonna speak from EOB.
Okay, go for it, Ari.
Hi. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ari. I'm on the Election Operations Board. Yeah. Also, thank you, everyone who has stayed, and thank you to our guests and the people that have shared as witnesses. Okay. The Elections Operations Board will be addressing the alleged conspiracy between Watfa Zayed, spring 2021 candidate for SGA President, and the Elections Operations Board. The complainant will argue that the Elections Operations Board provided better text formatting to Watfa Zayed for her candidacy initiatives over other candidates in the spring quarter of 2021. The The Elections Operations Board did not work with Watfa Zayed or any candidate for that matter to advance or give special priority to her candidacy in any regard. We are standing here today to address an unsustained false conspiracy and alleged political corruption regarding Watfa Zayed and the Elections Operations Board. As a defense, we do not bear the burden of entering evidence on the basis of suspicion and conspiracy. These allegations are defamatory to the Elections Operations Board, Watfa Zayed, her candidacy, and her leadership as a woman of color. The Elections Operations Board affirms that the board maintain neutrality in all matters regarding the DePaul Student Government Association elections. The Elections Operations Board enforce the Elections Operations Board bylaws in all matters, including, but not limited to, candidacies, campaign materials, and all general communications for the spring 2021 SGA elections. Jane Palos, the Elections Operations Board Chair, posted and formatted all the text on the SGA elections site. The Elections Operations Board communicated to all candidates who submitted an application to run a campaign for a position on SGA's general body during the spring 2021 elections that once the candidate reached the minimum number of signatures to fulfill the petition requirement, they would receive an email from the EOB and their name and biography would appear on the SGA election site. The Elections Operations Board communicated that those postings would appear on the SGA elections website within a 48-hour time frame from the time they were notified about their fulfilled petition requirement. No advantage was given to Watfa Zayed, including but not limited to her candidacy, campaign materials, or text formatting on the SGA election site. Let it be known that the previous statement also stands true in regards to Watfa Zayed's running mate, Kevin Halechko, including but not limited to his candidacy, campaign materials, or text formatting on the SGA election site, as the president and vice president run on a ticket. The Elections Operations Board rebukes the complaints, stated suspicion over this matter that Watfa and Kevin's biographies and initiatives were posted with the intent to advance their campaign. Any discrepancies in formatting were a clerical error and not done intentionally or with malice to any candidate. Keep in mind that the allegation brought forth today by David Hupp is against our clerical error on his quotation marks being on in the wrong place according to him. The complainant believes that the quotation marks being in a different place, sorry, I read the chat, than others gives them an advantage, and the clerical error proves to not give anyone an advantage. Let it be known that the Elections Operations Board is and was not contractually obligated to create or post candidates' biographies and campaign initiatives on a website, but rather it was a new initiative created by the 2019-2020 Elections Operations Board. The complaint filed from David Hupp was proved beyond suspicion and conspiracy that the Elections Operations Board and Watfa Zayed worked to provide an advantage to her candidacy in any regard. We urge the Judicial Board to dismiss and decide against a violation of conspiracy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ari. Watfa, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I'm gonna do my opening and closing, and then if anyone wants to stay past 9:30, I don't know if I have to be here. I don't mind leaving because that's all I have to say. But I just can't stay past 9:30, like kind of unchanging on that.
Okay, we
But
will not hold that against you in any way.
thank you so much. Okay, so this allegation honestly sounds a little ridiculous. I really couldn't care less about the formatting of the website. All I did was copy and paste my responses from my text messages with Kevin, and I just put them in DHub. So nothing, I have nothing to defend myself against this because nothing happened. And in my opinion, this is an invalid claim. It has no evidential backing, at least for my involvement. And again, very interesting that for some reason it's me being targeted. And not that I'd want Kevin involved in this because he shouldn't have to waste his time with it, but technically you ran on a ticket, so he shouldn't be here too, but it's fine. But to transition into my closing statement, just so I can head out, I've been in positions of leadership since my freshman year of high school, not just college. So I've been doing this for a long time, and not once was my leadership questioned like this. And some people in this call can attest to my leadership in high school because they went to high school with me and they're still here trying to do this to me, basically. But not once did I experience such defamation, and I have actually been certified by leadership training programs, so I'm coming into this role of president with a lot of experience under my belt. And these allegations are not only dismissive to my qualifications and accomplishments, but they also do not change my ability to lead and bring change to the university, which I am passionate about doing. The student body agrees with this. It's not like I won by a small margin. I won by 18% of votes. So Right now, what we're challenging isn't just challenging me and my ability, we're challenging the will of the student body who voted for me and voted me as their student body president. Through my training, I was taught to call in and not to call out, which I've mentioned a number of times, that if anyone has a problem with me, I'd appreciate it if they would come to me. And I have been open about that. And if I had a problem with anyone else, I did talk to them privately instead of calling them out in front of a room of people. I was expecting the same respect back, but I did not get that. Throughout this past year, I was constantly called out by the parties involved in this case, simply instead of simply having a conversation. After all, we are human and we are in a pandemic. Not once did the parties involved reach out to me privately to discuss problems with my leadership. And I find it very sad and cowardice that there's individuals hiding behind David and his claims right now instead of owning up to the fact that they have a problem with my leadership and who I am. That is very ridiculous, especially when people have come forward saying they don't feel comfortable making decisions about this trial without knowing who's providing the information. That is cowardice and not representative of a good leader. Okay, that says a lot about their character and their intentions for this whole trial. To be transparent, Wesley's running mate in this past election did not meet his constitutional requirements for meetings with his academic affairs committee. He was supposed to meet with his senators 6 times throughout the quarter. He met with them once. So if I wanted to hold that idea of accountability, I could have held Keith accountable as well. But I know we have to make excuses because we are in a pandemic. We are going through a difficult time. Other parties involved in this trial have made SGA members uncomfortable and made some of them quit. I hope to God I haven't done that to anybody here. Part of my training that qualified me for this role taught me to be empathetic and to forgive those who have wronged me. And throughout this past year, I have forgiven these parties multiple times and given excuses for them. I provided so many excuses for their behaviors, the way they treated me and the way they treated others in meetings in SGA and meetings outside of SGA. I have made so many excuses and it's become clear that the problem isn't with my leadership. The problem is the lack of respect for women in color, women in leadership, specifically women of color in leadership. Between Giselle, Alyssa, and myself, these parties involved in the trial have targeted us since the beginning of our terms. Women of color, however, are incredibly strong and resilient. I know these allegations may cause some of you to question my ability, but I implore you to look at what I was able to accomplish this year. I was able to accomplish hate speech policies, expanded ethnicity options, helping with the vaccine campaign, diversity, equity, and inclusion town hall, long overdue support for Palestinian students, and a statement that was just released as president-elect and our cabinet-elect for Palestinians that had to be delayed because of this trial. We had to delay supporting students for this trial. And right now, I'm only human, I can only improve, and I hope everyone recognizes that, but I also want everyone to recognize that the time we spent, the 3.5 hours we have spent here right now is preventing us from serving students. And as Gato mentioned earlier, admin is looking at us like a joke. And imagine how much of a joke it is that we're spending time arguing with each other over stupid stuff like formatting a website and me not doing CRB because I had a rough quarter. You know, for me to spend, I'm like about to cry because I'm just so upset. Because for me to spend one of the 2 holidays I get a year crying in my room because I got a stupid email about a J-Board trial. And this was like, I get 2 holidays. Last year they were both ruined because of COVID. And I was with my grandparents and I had to leave because I had to come figure out how I was going to handle this situation. A situation that I don't think changes my ability to be a leader of this university. And the fact that you can say my character isn't called into question, but you're honestly dragging me through the mud for no reason. That my mental health has been so terrible the past month because of what's happening in Palestine, and it just had to get worse because of this. This was unnecessary, and I am honestly appalled by the individuals that did this. I don't know how you could be so disrespectful, so inconsiderate, and so fake to be kind to my face and do this behind closed doors. And I just hope you guys know I lost a lot of respect for you, and I'm done giving excuses because it's not fair to me. And that's all I'm going to say. I yield my time. I am sorry for taking so much time and being emotional, and I'm sorry for everyone having to come and waste their time on this call. That's all I have. I yield, and thank you.
Thank you, Watfa. Thank you, Watfa. That's my president. That's also my president.
Marcus, you're muted. We can't hear you. You're talking and we can't hear you. That's why other
Hey,
people
great.
can go. Yep.
Okay. All right. So I don't even remember what I was saying. Thank you, Watha, was one of the things. But yeah, David, would you like to present any evidence and witnesses you have?
Okay, first off, I wanted to again reiterate that I'm not specifically alleging conspiracy. I don't have my email in front of me, but I noticed that there was an anomalous difference, and in light of the evidence about the submission times, it seemed suspicious, and I asked that it be investigated. And the evidence from campus groups has not come in, so we honestly don't know. I mean, there are innocent and possible innocent explanations here, as I mentioned. The reason that I brought these complaints again is a function entirely of the inaccessibility of SGA to the student body, and I have tried to bring issues to SGA at GB. I felt like I've been deflected or kind of blown off. I have in fact texted my concerns in the past to WATFA. She asked that I not share the full conversation, but I have texted my concerns to her in the past, and I didn't really get a substantive response. So I have reached out to her privately. I can't speak to anyone else's motives in SGA, and I can't speak to whether anyone else in SGA has it out to get her or something. Based on the limited evidence that I had, it appeared that there had been some wrongdoing. And when I brought this to about half a dozen other people in SGA, they also thought that it was very concerning what the evidence showed. It appears that maybe D-Hub was incorrect about the evidence, but the evidence from campus groups is not here, so there really isn't any evidence beyond people saying what happened while we wait for that. And again, it may just be a simple clerical thing of a different committee member did that role at that point in time and just did things slightly differently, such that one of them was submitted. One of them was posted with more legible formatting. Might be just a completely innocent clerical thing, but we don't have any evidence right now. So I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. I hear you, David.
I hope it's an innocent explanation. That would be the best.
Sure. In the absence of evidence, would you like that to count as your closing statement? Or would you like to make a separate?
I mean, unless wait, where are we at? So we're on, was that evidence? And then yeah. I mean, if there is any evidence that the other people involved want to bring up and that might need to be addressed in a closing statement, that'd be the case. But that's yeah.
Okay. Well, I think if the defense would like to present evidence and witnesses, if you have any, feel free. But I think the allegation in this complaint was incumbent on you providing the evidence, and so far we don't have any.
Yeah, and I put in the request as soon as I could to Courtney, and she can submit it to IS, who submitted to campus groups, and we are also pulling out them. So,
and if that evidence comes in and shows anything particularly relevant, an appeal, a separate trial can be had, but this one has to be ruled on the evidence that we do have, not the evidence that
I assume that you guys will get the evidence when it comes.
Yes.
So, nothing we can do now.
That's correct. Okay. Any closing remarks from any of the parties involved?
I was just going to say, as the defense, we have no obligation to provide any evidence of anything. And because of lack of evidence on the complainant side, if there's no evidence on their side, we don't have to provide anything on our side. Closing argument is, can't prove something that didn't happen. Absolutely no conspiracy between WATFA and Kevin and the Elections Operations Board. It's clear as day that there was no conspiracy between us. A formatting issue when it becomes about bullet points and quotation marks, that doesn't become our problem anymore. That becomes your problem for the way that you see things. So don't go off on the elections board when you don't have any idea what they're going through. The fact that they have to take out all of their time to go and add this on top of their busy schedules and just have to deal with this every single day, that the fact that there is a literal allegation against us for the formatting for a quotation mark, for an extraneous quotation mark to be in a different place, that is ridiculous. There was absolutely no conspiracy between WAFA and Kevin and the Elections Operations Board. It is clear as day. Can't prove something that didn't happen, and that's all that we have to say.
Okay, thank you, Jane. With that, I think we are done with the public portion. The justices are going to have private deliberation now, and in the coming days, we'll make a decision and we'll make that public. So I guess with that, I will adjourn this meeting at 9:39. And everyone involved, you are free to go. Justices, please stay behind for just a few minutes.
Oh, I completely forgot something. But, can I say?
Sure, go for it. Yes.
I forgot to mention. I did mention I talked to half a dozen people. No one else wanted to come forward and support it because of fear of retaliation. I mean, that might have been obvious, but and this complaint did originate from me. No one else wanted to touch it.
Okay, noted. Thank you for sharing that. All right, everyone, have a good night. Get some rest. It's been a lot of screen time. Yeah, we'll let you know what we decide.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marcus. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Johnny.
Yeah, let me give me 1 second. And then I will head out. Give me 1 second.
No worries.
Marcus, I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you for your thoughtful handling of the of this. I know it was not fun for anyone. So
just trying to make it as painless as possible. Thanks for cooperating.
As the least pain possible. So thank you so much again, and you guys have a nice evening.
All right, you too. See you, David.
Okay, my question was, I'm only a justice for one of these, correct? So do you want to put me in a waiting room for the other ones, or like how do you want to handle that, or should I just go right now?
Marcus, I think you still have one guest too.
Oh shoot, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, and you need to
let's
stop recording.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.